Hello, everyone. So today we're doing something that's a little bit unusual for me, which is like reaction content, the lowest art form that there is. So we're doing a kind of reaction to this Joseph Anderson video, which many of you may be familiar with if you know The Witness. It's called The Witness, a great game that you shouldn't play. It is, if you search for The Witness on YouTube, it is the most popular Witness video on YouTube. My recollection of it is fairly weak, but I don't remember liking it or thinking that it was very good. So I don't normally do this kind of thing, but there's this coffee thing that I set up for people to give me money, mostly because I've been working on well, actually I'll pop this open. I've been working on a extremely long game design lecture, which is still in progress and at the moment has 451 slides. And anyway, that seemed like a huge waste of money, so I decided to set up this coffee so that I could get some money there. And as a little bit of a joke, I set up this goal that I would do this reaction thing if people gave me $500. And some of you freaks out there have a little bit more disposable income than I guess I anticipated. So here we are, and I have to do the thing that people have paid me to do. So that's what I'm going to do. Although it is on YouTube, I'm going to watch it in a VLC window because that seems like it will be less problematic if, you know, technical issues come up or whatever. All right, so without further ado,
This is all about perspective. It's the only conclusion that I can think of that pulls it all together. It's a game about experiencing things multiple times and seeing something different each time. I loved this game. I also hated it. I think you should play it. I also think you shouldn't play it. I'm not trying to be coy or difficult. This is simply how conflicted I am on the game, and after failing to write this script several times, I've resolved that the only way I can get through it is to be honest to the point of being contradictory. This video will spoil everything about this game. Reviews have purposefully omitted several important features. I will not be doing that. If you have the slightest intention of playing this game, whether it's a week from now
I drank all my tea already.
when it goes on sale, then do not watch this video. This is not a review, and this game is best played blind.
Discovers having a nuanced opinion. Well, I make no guarantees about whether I'm going to be angry or anything. You know, I don't know how much to interrupt the video. It's a long video. But, you know, my initial thought was like, I don't disagree that it's a game about perspective, although I don't necessarily know that it's about looking at the same thing different ways always. Sometimes it is, but
I had two questions I wanted answered before I started playing The Witness.
video is too quiet. Okay, well, that's good to know. I can, if you guys let it clip, then it's going to be really annoying to me.
The first was, why is it called The Witness? The second was, how is the game going to keep line puzzles interesting for its entire duration? After playing the game for 50 hours, I can answer this question here with, it doesn't, and I can only propose a guess for the first one.
Oh my god, there's too much text here. I gotta read this text. Hold on. I've got like 3 different windows going on here. Okay, what is this? Oh, okay. All right. I mean, well, obviously that's that's just an opinion. Just let me know if like if the video is still too quiet and I can try to do things.
For reasons that are unfortunately so complex that it needs its own section later. So let's get right to it with what is the biggest chunk of The Witness, gameplay. The game starts like Infinifactory does, no title screen, no selecting anything, you launch the game and after it loads you're put right at the start of the game. You have no idea where you are or where you're going, and the game doesn't even trust you with the ability to turn around yet. You have to walk forward and go through its silent tutorial. A lot has been said about this game's ability to teach you mechanics without pop-up tutorials or a helping hand. You're left to infer the rules of the puzzles being presented to you on your own. So at the start, it's as simple as drawing the line from the beginning.
Yeah, the Infinifactory thing, I was like, that's a little weird, but I'm also like, this video is almost 10 years old, so I don't necessarily know that it was weird at the time to say that. Other than I would say, like, it's certainly true that it's more of the old school variety to just kind of have the game start up.
To the end. Then there are simple modifiers to how you draw those lines that you have to follow. The puzzles here are short, so when you make a mistake, you can quickly try again. This part of the game is less about teaching you how to solve these individual puzzles and more about laying the foundation for you to be able to work out for yourself how to solve every puzzle. Whether the game succeeds in doing this is something we'll be talking about. You're also taught that some puzzles will unlock things. In this case, you're led around by neon wires to the next panels, which eventually end at a locked gate. You open it, and now the whole island is available to you. There are 11 main puzzle hubs that you can approach in any order, although the game does try to guide you towards select areas first. There are 2 side areas along this path that I explored my first time through. For now, let's stop at one of them, a puzzle that is far more complex than anything you've seen so far, with shapes and concepts you haven't had to deal with yet. You can try to solve this.
I mean, I guess at this point we're just explaining the witness, like what it is.
But the panels that teach you the rules of this puzzle are nearby, so the idea here, I think, is that most players will give up and follow the path to where they learn the rules and then turn around and go back now that they have the knowledge necessary to open this puzzle. This is trying to teach the player that if something is beyond them, that they might want to consider going somewhere else and then coming back. Maybe they haven't learned a lesson yet. So far so good, right? Well, let's continue. There are 2 areas nearby that have what I consider to be the easiest set of puzzles in the game, the Orchard series and the Seaside set of Mirrored Lines. I went to the latter section first and completed it before moving on. This was fairly enjoyable and required a leaping guess to see that you have to use the background behind the puzzle as a guide to solve some of them. Even though I worked this out quickly, I think this is poorly communicated to the player and is too big of a departure from what came before it to be reasonably worked out. The environmental aspects in the Orchard do a much better job of this, so it might be forgivable.
I mean, sure, but like neither of these things are even necessary or make any progress towards anything in the game, so
If the game wanted you to go there first, but then the game didn't have.
I also would definitely disagree with the general assessment that the Orchard is one of the easiest areas. Like, a lot of people get stumped here, so.
To be an open island, so it's also not that forgivable. The rest of this area is good. I like the final series here that twists the mirrored concept by having you repeat the puzzle layouts from memory. After this, a box opens and shoots a laser beam across the island to a mountaintop. If you're human, this will be a curious enough event that you will follow the laser to that mountaintop to see what that's all about. You'll pass a few areas on your way and eventually arrive there. So this is the goal of the game, to find more lasers to shoot at this mountain. I think it's...
You know, I see like almost nobody do that when I've watched people play the game. It's like really surprising that almost nobody goes and sees where the laser goes. They're just like, oh, it's a laser, moving on. So, you know. Let's see. Misconception that you should be able to walk up to any puzzle and be able to understand it. Right. Well, the game has already explicitly tried to tell you that sometimes you will run into things that you probably don't understand and don't have the ability to understand. Like, that's why that vault is placed super early. You know, this is not something that I explicitly do so much in Taiji, but it's a good thing that the Witness does it, I think. Even if, like, from my point of view, I think some of the things about the structure of the Witness are not, maybe not possible to communicate totally non-verbally, but
conveyed fairly well. However, something far more important happens here. There's a line puzzle that doesn't do anything. It's a curvy line that you can draw over and over. It does nothing. I drew it 3 times and then stepped forward to see what it was all about. I saw the river below that looked like the puzzle, so I clicked on it. This happened and I yelled, "Holy shit!" There are more puzzles like this in the game, and I've gone through this sequence of events carefully in order not to ruin any more than I had to, because I think there might be at least a few people who kept watching who thought the game only had panel puzzles. If this sort of thing has made you interested in the game now, this is your last chance to stop the video to avoid even more spoilers. Like so many other games lately, I've seen the
I mean, you know, considering the title of the video is like super clickbaity, at least so far, the fact that you would even care whether or not people might want to play the game because they've been spoiled on like environmental puzzles or something, is sort of counter to the actual title of the video, right? I also rarely see people find environmental puzzles from the mountain puzzle, even though like ostensibly it's supposed to be a tutorial on that, right? Or make it very likely. People often notice that, but like there's a big gap between noticing the things in the game and like deciding to click on a thing that's like not a puzzle, obviously, right? So which wasn't obvious to me when, you know, I was initially showing people the game or whatever. And so there was a little bit of like overzealous reaction from me that sometimes spoiled that for people, because like I didn't necessarily realize that there was a gap for them with the idea of like clicking on it, right? Yeah, a lot of times when people notice these things, be like, that's interesting. And like I think it's more common that people think that it's like going to be a clue for a puzzle later or whatever, right? But yeah. Okay.
witness compared to Dark Souls in regards to teaching you things. But even Dark Souls will put messages and NPCs down to guide you with information. You can also stumble or
I mean, Dark Souls has like maybe one of the worst and laziest tutorials of any game ever. So I definitely don't agree that Dark Souls does anything better as far as teaching the player about the game. My entire first playthrough of Dark Souls was an extremely abortive attempt where I did not understand what I was doing and played for about like 40 hours, and then I aborted completely and then played from the beginning like maybe a year later or something with a walkthrough. So I often advise people that like it's perfectly fine to play Dark Souls with a walkthrough. It's not going to make the game radically easier. You're still gonna have to get good at the game, but it is useful to just know like what place maybe you're supposed to go to next, and you can decide how much you like want to use that. But like the actual tutorial of like go over here and like hit a button and it tells you like this thing, totally terrible. And FromSoft continues to like not even try on this part of the game with even their you know, their latest games, right? So yeah, I mean, the spoiler warning is also useful from my standpoint, because I didn't think about maybe I should give a spoiler warning because, you know, I'm just being asked to react to a video. But if you haven't played The Witness and you're watching this video, then my recommendation is that you should play The Witness. But that doesn't mean that it's a game for everybody, right?
brute force your way through a lot of encounters in the early and mid game and learn lessons later while still progressing. Whereas if you hit a wall in The Witness, the game crosses its arms and goes, nope, nuh-uh.
All right, let me back up.
Last chance to stop the video to avoid even more spoilers.
Let me back this up
So
so I
many
can.
other games lately, I've seen The Witness compared to Dark Souls in regards to teaching you things. But even Dark Souls will put messages and NPCs down to guide you with information. You can also stumble or brute force your way through a lot of encounters in the early and mid game and learn lessons later while still progressing. Whereas if you hit a wall in The Witness, the game crosses its arms and goes, nope, nuh-uh, and won't let you progress through this area until you give it the exact answer that it wants. The more apt comparison, funnily enough, is the game's difficulty.
Well, it's hard to say what he's actually saying there, right? Because like the thing that he's showing explicitly is a knowledge gate. And it's like the idea of that is to try to prevent you from getting into an area that you're not going to have a good time with unless you have certain prerequisite knowledge, right? Now, I've said before, so it's worth saying again, that this is one of the things that I think the witness is the weakest at, like communicating non-verbally, right? Which is the idea that, oh, there's puzzles like this, and what they mean is that, right? That you shouldn't go to this area until you understand the thing, because you're going to have a bad time of it. Not just, oh, nuh-uh, I'm not letting you in. It's like, it's not for no reason. It's not to be like a dick, right? But I really don't know what he's saying other than that's the video that he chose to show. But then he's also showing a vault, right? So both of these things are very different in terms of their function, but they're both the same in terms of like they're a thing that you're supposed to come back to later after you like understand what you're supposed to do here. But I do think that's something that I mean, I'm not even sure that it can be done better unless you like explain these things verbally, and part of the design of the witness was to try to not explain any of the gameplay verbally. That was just like part of the goal of the design, right? So I think it would be better if those panels weren't lit up until some other puzzle was completed. So fundamentally no, because it's a knowledge gate, right? And you know, I talked about this a little bit in my what is a witness like lecture. Well, I'll put a link in the description to that probably. If I forgot to, then feel free to leave a comment on the video. But anything else that you might do, like not power the thing until you solve other puzzles, or you get a key that lets you go unlock the door or whatever, is then like a proxy for the player's knowledge, and it's not an actual measure of their knowledge, right? So it's possible that somebody could not finish, for example, the swamp area, right? If we go back to this, he's talking about this puzzle, right? You could not finish this area, but you could still get into this area and you could finish this area, right? As long as you understand the swamp enough to do this puzzle, then you understand it enough to do this area, right? So it's actually kind of a cleaner design in that sense. It's just messier in the sense that the player is unclear about that that's even a thing, right? They're not aware that knowledge gating is something that the game's doing, and so they're just like, I can't figure this out, and I don't understand why the game won't let me learn it, because there's a lot of intransparency in the game, right? So they're thinking like, why can't I just learn the mechanic here? And it's like, well, because there's a section of the game that's actually designed to give you a good experience while learning the mechanic, and this panel is not that. So, but yes, you could have something where, oh, okay, you go finish the swamp and you get a key, and then that green key lets you open any of the green doors, and so then you could go into this area once you have that green key, and it would be a proxy for your understanding, but it would also be like a more aggressive thing, because you would have to do more to actually be able to access this area than you have to do in the final game, which is just that you have to have understood it well enough to be able to solve this, right? Okay. So, you know, I think it's a little bit of an intransparency problem where you sometimes don't understand this, right? I mean, even I did not necessarily understand why these things were like this the first time I played the game. So I do think that it's something that I'm not surprised if people are confused by. And I often will just, if I'm like recommending the game to people or talking to them about Taiji, right? Like people personally that are going to play the game, I will often just tell them this, right? I'll just be like, if you run into a puzzle in the game and it seems really complicated and it has some things on it that you've never seen before, then there's always like somewhere in the game that's meant to teach you about that thing, and you're not supposed to try to learn it there, right? Yeah, I don't know that he understood that it was a knowledge gate, right? I didn't understand that either. I just thought like, okay, like it means that sometimes there's things you're not going to understand, but like that's not just an arbitrary decision, right? Obviously there's things that you're not going to understand, but it's true, you could structure it more aggressively, right? And gate things actually behind solving puzzles rather than knowledge gating. But I think that it was a worthwhile and interesting experiment to do this, and I like when games do this kind of thing now. So I don't know, that's like my opinion, I guess.
If you hit a wall in the witness, the game crosses its arms and goes, nope, nuh-uh, and won't let you progress through this area until you give it the exact answer that it wants. The more apt comparison, funnily enough, is the game's difficulty. It fosters that same elitist attitude that I hate about Dark Souls, even though I love the game specifically for that difficulty. It's always so easy to point to the "you're just bad" excuse, or the stance that "I got through it, so anyone who else doesn't sucks," which is meant to somehow elevate the game above criticism. I don't know how they think that. Not many Dark Souls or Witness fans do this, but it does happen. I've seen some very legitimate criticism of the games be dismissed because of it. If we go back to that orchard near the starting area...
Okay. I mean, this seems like a more criticism of like idiots on the internet than of the Witness. But it's fine.
So anyone who else doesn't sucks, which is meant to somehow elevate the game above criticism. I don't know how they think that. Not many Dark Souls or Witness fans do this, but it does happen. I've seen some very legitimate criticism of the games be dismissed because of it. If we go back to that orchard near the starting area, you can see that the game is trying to teach you to look at the environment for hints. The branches here sort of mimic the tree that's in view, and the only other information you have to work with is that one branch has an apple. So the correct goal is to match the apple on the drawing. I figured this out immediately, but I had already gone to the mountain and seen the river line. If we go to Super Bunny Hop's review, you can see him struggling with it. And he's not a stupid guy. He's simply being conditioned by the game to focus on the panels and solve it there, and not to look for anything in the environment yet. People have criticized him for this in the comments on his video, not a lot, but it's there. Some people love the game for this sort of thing, when you're taught to look at something in a certain way, to see it from a different perspective. The click moment, or the aha moment. And I am one of those people. That's what I loved about this game. I often felt challenged, and when that challenge was fair, I was very satisfied that I solved something that had me stumped. Even with finding lines to draw on parts of the island around you.
Okay. Right. So this is again just like a criticism of fans of The Witness, I guess. I mean, every game has annoying people that think that the game is perfect and won't accept any criticism of it. So I don't know. I wish my jump back was like a little shorter in here. I don't know if anybody knows how to like change that in here, but it like jumps back like 10 seconds, which is really more than I want to jump back, but okay.
The vast majority of this game is still focused on panel puzzles. These can be boiled down to two very simple ways that each one of them challenges you. First, to identify and understand the rule, or the code depending on...
Identify is misspelled. Wait. Okay.
What you want to call it. Secondly, to apply that rule or code and find the correct path through the maze that adheres to it. That's it. That's 90% of the game in The Witness. And when it does a good enough job in introducing new rules and teaching them to you, you'll spend most of your time trying to work out the solution. And this is almost always fine. You know the rules, you just need to work through applying them. It's when the game fails to communicate with you or introduces a new idea without any prior information that it becomes monumentally frustrating. You're left staring at something that may as well have been created by aliens for how incomprehensible it is, or at worst, when the game's introduction doesn't work as well as it should, or leaps forward with the concept and expects you to make a similar leap without preparation. I didn't get stuck very often.
Okay. So again, the knowledge gate concept, or the idea that you're not necessarily supposed to do a puzzle always when you first see it, is certainly an intransparency thing in the game. It is odd that he points it out at the beginning as like, this is what this is supposed to do, but doesn't immediately critique it and say that, well, that didn't actually work for me and I didn't understand that until I'm like looking back on it now, which would then explain why he's saying like, well, I had this problem, this problem, this problem, which is like that didn't work and I didn't understand it, right? Right. Well, that's what I was saying, Demino, about the calling a player stupid because he didn't get something right away. Right? I was saying it was a criticism of like Witness fans or like discourse around the game or something. Which fair enough. I mean, I think that it's certainly true that a lot of it it takes a lot of experience, like watching people play puzzle games, to kind of get to where you have this attitude where you don't like, if they want a hint, that's fine. If they don't want a hint, that's fine. I'm just here to like watch them experience whatever with the game, not to make it be anything other than what it is. Other than, you know, like I said, I can offer assistance if it's wanted, right? But that takes a lot of experience, and oftentimes like fans of video games are not the most well socialized of individuals, so it can also be harder to kind of negotiate that. But yeah, you know, people are like, one of the interesting things about The Witness is that people have such different experiences with it, and sometimes things are like super easy for people and super hard for somebody else, right? Like the desert area here, very specifically for me, I just bounced off of it. I didn't even figure out how to do one puzzle the first time I went to it, right? Whereas other people I see, they go up and, you know, either they get lucky or they sort of like intuit something about it, and so they get started right on it and just go straight through the area to the end. Okay. Yeah, I really do wish I could skip back, but I don't know enough about VLC to like do that quickly. I mean, I can skip back, but it's going back like 10 seconds, which is just way too much time. So I'll just keep going.
I think this is more due to luck than any amount of intelligence or perception on my part. In the desert area, I noticed very quickly that the sun will erase lines on the panels if viewed from a certain angle, changing your perspective. And I can vividly imagine the frustration someone who doesn't notice this might go through, and how it could turn into repulsion when they finally do figure it out. How the fuck was I meant to know that? They'll probably cry, but because I did notice it, this ended up being one of my favorite areas in the game, which is one of many reasons why I'm so conflicted when it comes to judging it. For a place that I did hit a wall,
in that area, I've also seen like people either think it's their favorite area or they hate it, and that's another interesting thing about The Witness, right? Like there's very different viewpoints on each area, right? Right. Well, you know, to the intent of the design of The Witness, right? It's kind of meant to induce a let's say an anegoic perspective in the player. So I didn't really get the desert when I played it first. So I mean, like, I solved it, right, but I didn't really quite understand how I was supposed to think about it. So it took some time for me to like appreciate the design of the area. But you know, it has a fundamental problem, which is that it's amenable to the YOLO method. Where you just run around like a madman looking at the panel until you see some glint of something and then go, ah. Okay.
I have to go to the quarry after the desert. One of the entrances into this area is a set of 2 doors. The second one has 2 L shapes, and that's it. That's all the information it's telling you. This was the first time I had seen these types of blocks. And it looks really simple, right? It looks so simple. And it's a door that serves as an entrance to an area, so it must be one of the introductory puzzles, right? I'm not exaggerating when I say I was here for over an hour, and my thought process was this. So I'm obviously meant to draw those shapes. I try and fail. I wonder if the square that contains the symbol has to be inside the shape or if it's just a guide. I noticed that the one in the bottom right has a shape that's impossible to draw while having that square inside of it, so I figured that I don't have to have that block inside the shape. So I spend over an hour trying to find some way to squeeze both individual shapes on the grid, failing each time because the line I draw for the first one always gets in my way when it comes to the second one. I learned that when you need to draw shapes, you always need to use the edge of the puzzle grid in order to close it off, and I keep trying and trying, and then I begin to berate myself because this is obviously a tutorial puzzle. It's the entrance door to a whole area. This is trying to teach me something basic, and the answer is that you can draw both shapes as one combined shape like this. Am I an idiot for not working that out sooner? You'll have to be the one to decide that. But when I solved this, there wasn't any sense of aha, it was they could have made that a little more fucking clear. Of course, these shapes are introduced better in another area, but I think I've already made my point in how misleading this door can be. To show it in another way, there's another puzzle in the quarry that had me similarly stumped. It involves colored stars, and after trying it a handful of times, I recognized that it was too advanced for me to be expected to solve it, and surmised that it must be taught in another area. Sure enough, it was, and this puzzle was easy after that. These kinds of puzzles that are placed at a sink are both good and bad. To go back to Dark Souls for a second...
A sink? Placed at a sink? What does that mean? So... Right. Well, I mean, it's a problem with intransparency, right? Now, if we're gonna go back and compare Dark Souls and try to talk about how Dark Souls doesn't have a problem with intransparency, then I can rant about that for a long time. But it's the double-edged sword of intransparency is that you don't necessarily know, right? And if you don't have a conception of an idea of like knowledge gates, then you don't even know what you're looking at, right? It's something that, I mean, as far as I could tell, this particular usage of it was something that the Witness really invented, right? I mean, you could look at like Riven or something, and technically like the original Myst was also knowledge gated. But like those games, it's a little bit more, it's different because like it's not clear that something is even a puzzle. Maybe the fireplace thing in Myst, it's clear that it's a puzzle, but yeah, you know, it's like I said, it's just a standard thing that's a problem with the Witness, and I often just tell people because I don't think that it's a great experience to have that experience that he had, where you get stuck on a knowledge gate and you think that you're supposed to learn it there, and the fact that like the symbols aren't flashing to give you any indication of what you've done wrong is not didactic to you that there should be somewhere else that you learn it. And the placement of that particular gate, it's likely that you run into it before you've done many areas at all, right? So you don't even have a context necessarily that there are tutorials for all of these things, right? If you had done like 2 symbol areas, which is what it looks like he did, it looks like he went and did the swamp, and then like when he saw this other thing, he was like, oh, right, okay, like obviously there was a swamp that introduced this thing, so I get it, right? Or there was just like the other puzzle looked intimidating, right? And this one looked simple, right? Because it's like, oh, it's really small, so it must be easy, right? So, you know, it's a fair criticism that the game's doesn't tell you that this is a structural thing in the game and that there's always going to be a tutorial for any of the symbols, right? But yes, you're right that like there was a thing there with black and white stones, which is sort of like indicative that, okay, you should know how to do this. But it's in transparency, so it's fair to say that like you could have a bad time due to intransparency, due to not knowing how the design of the game is structured, right? Yeah. Well, I mean, he said that earlier. I think that if this was something that he didn't understand at the time, the point of it, then he should have made it clear in the video here that he didn't understand that at the time, but he understands later, right? Like at the time of writing this video, because it sort of makes it incoherent, because it's like, well, but you said that you understood that. Whereas I would happily say I didn't understand that at all until much later in the game, right? Even though like I recognized that now I knew how to do that door, so let me go back to that. I didn't understand that that was supposed to teach me that the game has lots of things like that, but I'm also not extremely stubborn. I'm the type of person who, like, if I get really stuck and I'm getting frustrated, I recognize that the game's very open, and part of the design of the game is to allow me to go do other things so that I maybe don't lose my mind banging my head against the same puzzle. And I've tried to like, I remember trying to advise my brother one time because he was doing that. He was just like he was just like furious. It might have been that same puzzle. I don't even know. And I was just trying to be like, you could like do other things. You don't have to do this right now. But I think he stuck with it until he figured it out. But yeah. Well, I think it's the feeling that he had that the puzzle was easy, right? Because it looks easy because it's got like 2 symbols on it and it's not that big. It's like a 4x4 or something. And so it seems like you should be able to figure it out, but I don't know. I don't know what the right solution there is. I mean, even OOO or OO or whatever, the game that I played recently that is a puzzle platformer that also has knowledge gates, has a similar problem where if you don't kind of understand the structure of the game, then it's hard to know what you're supposed to do, right? Because you kind of end up at like a dead end and you're like, okay, there's a warp here. I guess I got to warp somewhere else, but you don't necessarily know, right? I certainly didn't. I was like, I don't know where I'm supposed to warp. The answer is like you're supposed to warp back to where there was a branch in the level design, but I didn't know that. So it was sort of frustrating because I was like, but there's all these warp points, right? And I still think in that game, it's like they should have not had warp points until you got to that branch. And then the only other warp point would have been to go back to the branch, right? Like there's a ridiculous amount of warp points that are introduced before you run into a dead end. And so it just kind of leaves you with like, wait, why are there all these warp points? And it ends up being something that like maybe matters in the super late game, but in the early game, it doesn't. And, this is a point I've made before that like the fact that something works for the late game or is important for the late game is not an excuse to make the early game suck. No, I don't think that's what's happening in The Witness here. I think it's more just that if you don't get the concept, then you don't get the concept until you do, right? Rather than like the game is bombarding you with something that it could have easily avoided, which I think in OOO it could have because the game's very linear. Okay, so what's going on here? The hard puzzles are equivalent to the Black Knight and the Undead Burg.
The equivalent of the Black Knight and Undead Burg. Are you meant to fight them now? Probably not, but you still can, and if you succeed, awesome. Same for here. So I like them for that, but I think there could have been better ways to make it clear that you haven't finished the introduction to this type of puzzle just yet, especially when they can masquerade as simple challenges. Worse than...
Okay, you can't say that and not give an idea of what you think would be a better way. Otherwise, you're just bullshitting. You have to like throw out what you think would have been better, not just say, I think there could have been a better way. It's like, well, if you can't think of a better way, then there's no evidence that there actually could have been a better way. And as I said, I don't really know that there could have been unless the game broke its sort of like vow of silence about the puzzles part, right? Which you could certainly do. You could even criticize the game for choosing to do that, but it's an explicit choice in The Witness that it doesn't ever try to tell you anything about the puzzles using words. Like, it's just part of the design goals of the game is to see how far you can go with that kind of design, right? But even if he had just said that, right, like it really would have been good for it to have a thing that's like, there's a tutorial for this elsewhere, but still like let you try if you wanted to, right? Like that would have been fine. But you can't just be like, I think it could have maybe been done better, and then not like proffer any idea, even if it's a stupid one.
All of this, however, and perhaps the worst thing in the entire game period, are the rare few puzzles that are so obscure that, to me, they don't even make sense after you solve them. One is in a side area connected to the quarry. You have to use shadows as either an area to avoid or as a guide to follow in order to draw the correct path. It's introduced well and you can blaze through them quite quickly after that. Then I came to this one and, after over another hour of trying, I gave up. This is one of 3 times while playing the game that I had to resort to using a guide, and even after seeing the answer, I still don't understand the rule here. The shadows are broken. You can't stay in them the whole time. You can't stay out of them the whole time either. You can't stay to just one branch. I still have no idea what you're meant to be looking at here, and it doesn't build on any of the past lessons that this area taught you.
Okay. I mean, it's fair enough to get annoyed at this puzzle, right? Because it's sort of one of those things where the puzzle's meant to be like stretching the edge of the rules and going a little more intuition based, but like just following the rules that you knew before, there's only two possibilities for this puzzle, right? Which is that you either draw it here or you draw it here, right? And so then the question is like, well, why? I mean, I guess because like more of the thing is shaped like that, right? But it's just sort of stretching the literal definition of the rules here to try to keep it interesting, I guess. Because if you're just drawing the line exactly on the thing the whole time, then it's kind of boring, right? Well, I can understand why you could get stuck, right? That's fine. You could get stuck here because, like, based on as you understand the rules, right? It wouldn't make sense because I'm going outside of the thing. Now, it is true, I believe, what Caitlin says, that you do also have to go outside of the thing a little bit on the previous one. So this is sort of like just pushing that a little bit further or something. But don't quote me on that because I don't remember exactly the sequence of these puzzles. But I don't know. It's just part of like trying to make it interesting. But if you think like, oh, it's violating the rules, then you might think like, oh, the game has changed the rules. And so now I have to guess. And especially if you're in the mode where you think that that earlier puzzle you did in the quarry was like where you were supposed to learn that mechanic, then you would really be thinking like, oh, there's puzzles in this game that are complicated and I just have to guess the rules. And that's what kind of game this is, when it generally isn't. And so this is sort of like toying with the question of like, what can you actually do in terms of drawing the line versus what the shadows are doing, because the shadows are like free to do other things. So I don't know. I'm just kind of reading chat a little bit to see if there's something else that I missed. I don't think so. Oftentimes I do see people try to look up at the thing that's casting the shadows, and in most cases it's like not helpful except for like the very, very first couple puzzles, because usually the thing is too weird, or it's too far away, or it's too much at a weird angle when you try to look at it for you to really be able to tell.
The other times I have to resort to a guide were the red door in the sunken ship and the final section in the speaker jungle. Let's go there first to highlight a problem that I may have luckily avoided in some areas. The most treacherous thing about the design of this game, specifically never giving any information and instead letting easy puzzles do it for you, is that sometimes it assumes that players are going to think of things in the same way that the developer is. Or in this case, perceive them in the same way. I think this is slightly easier to do with sight since you can make sure shapes and colors are really distinct. In the jungle, the puzzles involve sound. This whole area is like the shadow puzzle I just showed. Even knowing the solutions, I have absolutely no fucking idea what I'm meant to be doing here.
This is where I learned I was tone deaf.
The sounds and match them to shapes on the panels, but I genuinely do not understand what the game wants. Is it volume, pitch, tone? Does going up match a rise or lower in each? Do the shapes that come later match a small sharp sound, or are those sharp sounds associated with a bigger symbol since they have the most impact? And this is all before I say that I can't even tell some of these sounds apart. The bird chirps fast, and when I hear the sounds back to back, I can tell they're the same. but when you break the chain and then go back to a third sound, that kind of seems like it's the first sound again, but it turns out it isn't. Maybe. I have no idea. I brute forced my way through all of the early puzzles here. By that I mean I whipped out pen and paper, and I wrote down all the different sequences that I could enter into the panels, and I did them all in order and crossed them off when they didn't work, until I finally eliminated all the wrong answers and got the right solution. When I got to the more complicated one at the end, I said fuck it and looked up the answer. I still don't understand it. The only other time...
Oh my gosh. Oh man. I'm gonna take a brief restroom break. I know we're taking forever to get through this video. My god. But I'll be back in a sec. All right, I'm back. So I don't, you know, I don't want to imply that like I think that it's funny that he's tone deaf. It's not particularly funny. I found it funny that he was so adamant on not looking it up when he obviously couldn't tell the difference between the tones. He was so adamant that he would sit there, and even though the game is like making it very hard to brute force it, he would still just brute force it. That was what I was laughing at. And you know, as some people said in chat before, it's very, very ego driven behavior to do that. I mean, it's fine, like it's just funny. Okay.
I resorted to a guide was the red door puzzle in the crash ship. I read that this is considered by many to be the hardest puzzle in the game, and I wholeheartedly disagree. Difficulty implies that there's something to logically work through, and I firmly believe that this puzzle is a joke put in by the developers. It's once again about sound, but the game doesn't tell you that. In the jungle, the sound comes out of a speaker to make sure you know it's artificial and deliberate and tied to the panels. I couldn't find a speaker in the ship. It also has an invisible line that matches your actions, but again, the game doesn't tell you that. Hopefully you remember the seaside symmetry area and the puzzles that use the vanishing lines there. So without any information, you're meant to stand here...
I'm not sure what... I mean, the tone of the video is just generally annoying. But I'm also like, I don't think it's a huge stretch to ask you to remember things that you did earlier in the game, like in general. Like if you don't remember this section, that would be weird to me. Like it's a very memorable section, right? It's not like some weird obscure thing. So I do think that the shipwreck had some problems, right? I've mentioned these things before. One of the big problems is that it's like under this red light. And the red light seems extremely salient because you also have color puzzles in the game, and the colors on the panel look weird. They just seem kind of unusual, and then the red spectrum, right? So it's kind of like maybe this is color related, right? And I still don't really know whether it's supposed to be or not, but I think that it added an unnecessary confusion to this puzzle for me that made it much harder than it was. Eventually, I figured it out when I just ignored the fact that it was under a red light and stopped trying to overanalyze whether or not there was like some confusion about colors of dots or something. You know, also earlier you had like, for the color thing, you had your line was a specific color and the color of your line matched the color of the shapes, and that also doesn't happen here. I kind of think that it's just a puzzle that probably got under tested because it's sort of in a weird obscure spot, and oftentimes you don't even find it even if you go out to the shipwreck. So it probably just didn't get enough testing prior to release. That's really the thing. It's definitely not a joke put in by the developers, right? It's just intended to be like taking the audio puzzles concept and trying to make a hard vault puzzle out of it, right? Like, if you know that this is an audio puzzle, which I don't think is extremely hard to figure out, but that I would forgive you for forgetting, right? The like different size dots things, because it's like 5 puzzles in the whole game, right? And it's also not extremely memorable that that's how those work. And there's the combination of the other things that are going on with this puzzle that are confusing, like the red light and the fact that the dots are different colors and you haven't done that before. So you do have a lot of intransparency with this puzzle that makes it very hard. I don't believe that it is a color puzzle, but it's certainly something that I thought about because it's under the red light, right? So there's a lot going on with the puzzle and it's very hard, but it's also okay because it's like there has to be a white whale puzzle. There's always gonna be. When you're trying to put hard puzzles in there, you know, and it's maybe okay to have one of those in the game. With that said, I don't love the puzzle, but I was gonna say, was gonna say earlier, like if you know that it's a color puzzle, it's actually not that hard, right? Because like you can kind of just figure out what the sounds are, write them down a little bit, and then you can tell that like, oh, okay, there's not that many notes. There's like 3 or something and or 4, and you just have to like figure out what goes with what, and that's fine, right? But anyway, okay.
I know it's artificial and deliberate and tied to the panels. I couldn't find a speaker in the ship. It also has an invisible line that matches your actions, but again, the game doesn't tell you that. Hopefully you remember the seaside symmetry area and the puzzles that use the vanishing lines there. So without any information, you're meant to stand here staring at this panel and realize that the groaning ship and dripping water is the key to decoding it. You're meant to work out what symbol refers to what sound, then you're somehow meant to work out when the sequence of sounds starts, so you can hit the symbols in that order, while also using the invisible line in that same sequence. How you're meant to work out the beginning of the sound sequence is beyond me, aside from trial and error.
Well, like I said, one of the things is like, it's like this. And it's just 3 notes, right? So even if you just like shuffle it, even if you were just brute forcing it, right? Well, there's only 3 things that could be the first thing. It's not that complicated. The hard part is like determining the type of puzzle that it is, not like actually solving that.
Again, maybe I'm stupid and missing something, but there wasn't a single other puzzle in the game that had me Googling for a guide aside from these 3. Even if I got stuck for a while, I was still able to work through them, whereas if I ever solved these, it would be through guesswork. For the rest of the...
I mean, it's hard if you were just trying to solve it by ear, right? But like, I don't know. I mean, we've already seen from him earlier that he's the type of person who will just like bang his head on the same thing for hours, rather than resort to like something else, right? And I'm just the type of person who more quickly would think, well, I can't remember this, so I'll just like write the thing down. I'll just write it down and like listen to the tone and try to remember, okay, that tone, and then I'll wait for that tone again, and okay, how many notes were there between that and whatever, right? And try to figure that out that way, right? But he was also tone deaf, we established from the other thing, so he probably wouldn't have been able to even tell that they were like different pitches at all. So that is definitely going to make this basically impossible. Because because the other ones were already impossible.
Puzzles, you have some that are fantastic and others that I wish there were less of. The game boasts on its store page about having so many hundreds of puzzles, and we'll get to that store page in a little bit. For now, I'll say that it's not something to brag about when they're so quick and, in the case of the Treetop Village, so highly condensed that I ended up feeling annoyed rather than challenged.
That's right. The puzzles are too hard, but also the puzzles are too easy. These puzzles are so easy, and there's so many of them. But also they're too hard. I don't know. Yeah, that's true, right? Like, if you were watching this and you weren't familiar with The Witness, it isn't clear that that's a puzzle that you don't really have to do, although I'm always amenable to, like, the concept that optional is not really a thing because some people are completionist, right? And so therefore, like, if it's optional, I will do it, right? Some people are compulsively completionist to the point that even if they are having a terrible time of it, they will just keep banging on the same thing until they finish it, right? Yeah, something like that, right? I mean, it's fair. You want to get your money's worth out of the game or whatever.
It's what I meant earlier by it doesn't for the panels remaining interesting. I got through these quickly, and although it was sort of neat that the panels form bridges, I can't help but wish that they had been made bigger so that less of them were needed. The hedge maze zone is one of my favorite areas along with the
Okay. Oh God. All right. What? I'm trying to think of like how to even parse what his criticism is, because it's like there's too many puzzles in the game or something, or like I looked at the thing and it said it had 500 puzzles, and then I played the game and I thought that the puzzles were filler or something. Because like I got it really easily, I guess. I don't know. It's total. This is like totally misunderstanding the way in which the game is designed, right? Much like, you know, the earlier point about the knowledge gates and thinking it's just like arbitrary that the game is holding things back from me because it wants to brag about how smart the designer is or something, and how I'm an idiot because I can't figure out this puzzle easily. But you know, then it's like there's another section like this that the reason it has the bridges are as long as they are because they have as many puzzles as they have, not because there's a gap and you needed to fill it with puzzles. That's not how the design worked. It's like you did the puzzles that needed to be there for the tutorial, right? And then you built an area around how big that ended up being, right? It's unbelievably backwards in terms of like parsing the design of the game. Now I could understand like that you don't get why each of those puzzles are there, but the fact is that sometimes people have a hard time understanding what the idea is, and you have to give them puzzles that help clarify things. And maybe you got it very quickly. Oh, okay, I have to pair two things together, right? But that doesn't mean that like somebody else wasn't thinking like, oh, maybe they have to be like even numbers or something, right? They might have other questions, and those puzzles are there to help answer those questions so that people don't get later in the area and they don't understand the basics of it, right? So, all right.
desert. I also enjoyed drawing the shapes in the marsh after the game taught me their rules, although this area does suffer a little from the same high concentration of panels as the treehouse area. The standout puzzle in this
There's Oh, these puzzles suck and there's so few of them. No, it's like, I wish the game would have explained more to me. And then when I found the tutorial, I felt like it was over explaining it. It's like, okay. It's like, all right. There should be some like metacognition that should fire off that's like, oh, I didn't realize that there was a tutorial where I was supposed to learn the thing. And it would have explained it to me very gradually and in explicit detail, all the things that I figured out somewhere else. But, you know, okay.
Was the full-on Tetris one, which had a surprisingly easy solution that I missed for about 10 minutes before laughing to myself, happy that I finally solved it. Going back to the head...
I mean, once again, if you get a puzzle, it can be a good time. If you don't get a puzzle, it can be a bad time. This is not like a basis for criticizing the entire game. I'm not necessarily sure what this video is even trying to be, other than just like ranting about the game. I'm not even sure that it's trying to be a criticism, but it's certainly going to read like a criticism to a lot of people. Especially when you titled the video a great game that you shouldn't play, which means that you're acting as a arbiter of taste, i.e. you are suggesting whether or not other people should play the thing. So that frames it as though it's like a criticism. But, you know, if you don't get a puzzle, then it could be a bad time for you. But the fact that you had a bad time with the puzzle does not necessarily mean that the game is badly designed. It's just sort of like inherent in a puzzle game that you might not get it. And you might have a bad time with some puzzles. Now, that can be due to failures of design, for sure. You know, I mean, I'm doing a whole lecture trying to talk about like failures of design that can make things needlessly difficult for players, right? Where they're stuck on things that have nothing to do with the actual idea or concept of the puzzle. But, you know, that could very easily happen with the puzzle that he just talked about in the swamp here, the complicated one.
The standout puzzle in this location was the full-on Tetris one.
Sorry, my jump back is so... This puzzle, right? You could spend hours on this puzzle and then just be annoyed at the game, right? Because you didn't get it, right? And so then it's like, why was this here? This is stupid, right? And then somebody told me the thing, and I'm like, how was I supposed to guess that, right? It would be exactly the same as all of his other criticisms, such as they are. And so that's why they feel more like a rant than really a critique. But, you know, to some extent, he said it's not a review. So I will try to parse it that way. But it is like, when you titled the video the way that you did, that suggests that that you're telling other people whether they would or wouldn't enjoy it based on your experience, right? And that means, I think, that you're obliged to have that metacognition where you think like, well, okay, somebody else might have a different experience, right, with that than I did. Anyway.
Solution that I missed for about 10 minutes before laughing to myself, happy that I finally solved it. Going back to the hedge maze, the game is at its best when the panels are linked with the environment. The more the better, really. In this location, your character is linked to the lines you have to draw. You have to find the correct path through these mazes and learn the rules of both areas, paying careful attention to each one. I really enjoyed these, same goes for drawing the line by walking on the panels. The game has one of the best and subtle moments of teaching you here with this puzzle, since it shows that you don't have to draw the line in actual order from starting circle to end curve. As long as it remains one line by the end and doesn't break another rule, you can light up the panels in broken pieces. And the game teaches you this by forcing you to step on a middle piece in order to enter this room for the first time, which is the only way you can start this puzzle. A really simple and really clear way of teaching you. It's fantastic.
I mean, I agree that that's what it's doing, but that also might not work on somebody, right? And based on the overall approach that he's had to criticism in the video, you could consider that a flaw in the game, that it might not work for somebody, that they might not notice that. How was I supposed to notice that? So, I don't know. So my main frustration with the video so far is just that it's not clear what the video is trying to be, and as criticism, it's incoherent. But it feels also a little dodgy to say that it's not criticism, right? And just be like, well, it's, you know, I'm just rambling into a microphone really about the thing. That's all I'm doing. You know, I mean, part of my own frustration with even having to watch this video and do this thing is the general problem of information pollution on the internet, and this video is quite information pollution to me. And it's not necessarily that the things that he's saying are wrong, it's like the framing of the video suggests that he's doing something that he's not doing, when really he's just like ranting about his experience or occasionally highlighting things that he liked, right? Which is fine to do, but it's not criticism, and it's not analysis, and it's not providing something of value.
The last puzzles here with linking either side together and you having a choice between what you find easier or challenging yourself to do both were also great. It was clear what I needed to do, and it was building on my successes through this area. The temple and the bunker with stained glass weren't quite as satisfying, but were still enjoyable. They both once again use the environment to find a way for something to make a path over the panel or to show the real color.
I mean, I've had people say about that puzzle, how the hell was I supposed to know that, right? So, like, that's just a perspective that different people will have on different parts of the game, right? Like, sometimes something's so hard for people to get that, like, if somebody tells them, then they feel like they never would have figured it out, right? It's hard to say, maybe they would have eventually, but, right, it's just how it is. And it's not fair if you're analyzing the game to criticize those things just because you experienced it that way and not recognize that other people have different experiences with the game, right? Or to compare it to Dark Souls, as though Dark Souls doesn't also have problems where you don't know what to do, or it's very likely that you don't know what to do.
Colors of symbols so you can work out how to draw the line through them. The temple nudges you to realizing this through having you look through the broken windows and shutters to open the first two doors to the other puzzles. And the bunker does something similar with having the glass block your line of sight on puzzles before you can get to them. What I liked most about this concept, however, was how it was made.
Yeah, so it's like all of these things are like the design worked for him when it did, when it clicked, when the idea clicked and he understood it, and it didn't work when it didn't, right? Which is the only basis for criticism there, is to say that sometimes for some people, some parts of this game are not going to work because part of the design is that it's intransparent, right? That you don't know what you're supposed to do, and the game doesn't verbally tell you how the design of the game works, right? You're expected to like figure it out via intuition or experience, right? Which can be painful. But like, it's not a game that's trying to go down smoothly like Portal 2 or something, right? So it's just a design choice that the game has, right? To be the way that it is. It's not like unintentional, accidental. The designer of this game just didn't even realize that some people might have trouble with this, right? So, I don't know. Well, that's true also, right? It is the kind of game that you will have a better time with the more you play it, because you will become more in tuned with the design, right? You will sort of align with like the kind of things in the game, and there's a pattern to how it's designed. And so it starts to be the case that like, well, I know that like there's going to be some way that I can do this more easily, right? You know that if a puzzle seems really, really difficult, it's probably like I'm approaching it the wrong way, right? And it's not just like totally random bonkers symbol vomit or whatever, right? But I don't know.
More difficult later on. The final area of the 11 that I haven't spoken about yet is the town in the middle of the island. This combines all the lessons you learn throughout the game and is unfortunately placed in the most accessible location, leading to what I can imagine to be some frustrating moments for many players. Some of the puzzles here are hit and miss, and not always for that reason. I think it's fair for players to eventually realize that this is meant to be the final area, but even then a handful require you to have already solved the puzzle in this area before they become solvable, which is a really mean trick.
Huh? That was just an incoherent sentence, but I guess he means that there's puzzles that you can't come up to in this area immediately and solve. Which, I mean, it's an area, so like the design of all the other areas of the game is like that. It's just here that it's not always like obvious because the game's trying to like escalate the difficulty a bit, right? So it's not always like there's just a wire that runs to the next thing or whatever. But that's my guess, is that he means like you have to open this door to do the perspective thing, and you have to open the other door so that you can see this, right? But yeah, the fact that the puzzle is available, exactly. If it's the last area in the game and you haven't figured out by this point that the fact that I can see a puzzle does not exactly mean that I can solve it. Yeah, that's just kind of the thing. I mean, it's a little bit of a twist here, right? Because sometimes it is a non-obvious gating, but you had that in like the color puzzles area too, right? Where you had to do some things, right? But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like that thing about the town. I think that it's one of the cool things about that area, right? Because it makes it more mysterious, right? Where like even if you do know the symbols, then there's still something to figure out here, right? Like you could imagine a version of this area that was just straightforwardly, here's some puzzles that use symbols that you found in other areas, and if you figured them out, then you know what to do, right? It's like, well, then there's like nothing else to it that gives the area any kind of character of its own. It's just an area that has like a random assortment of puzzles from other areas. So I don't know. All right, let's keep going.
Using the glass door from solving a puzzle here to see the true colors on another next to it, or having to look at this red panel puzzle from the roof that unlocks from another puzzle, but not before they put some suspicious looking shadows nearby to trick you into thinking they're the real hint, when in reality it's a sun glare panel like in the desert. This one is pretty mean. But then this area also had one of the best...
I mean, they're part of the hint, right? It's like you just did a puzzle before that had like 3 things on one panel, and this one is like another thing where there's like a mix, but it's like really obvious that that's not enough to solve the puzzle because it doesn't even go to an exit, right? And also it has the like sun symbol thing, which is supposed to be like an indicator, right? It's like, where have you seen this before? This kind of shape on a panel. But you know, I don't know. It's part of the design of the game that it expects you to be paying attention. So you know, if you don't like that, then maybe it's not the game for you, but it's not. I don't know. Like the game is expecting you to pay attention and to notice increasingly subtle things, and this is a very subtle thing, but this is, as he mentioned, like maybe the hardest area or like the latest game area, right? So part of the idea of this area is escalating difficulty, and in this game that often means like pushing things further in a more subtle direction, and that's part of the overarching theme and idea of the game, is to like move you in the direction where you notice subtler and subtler things, right? So to discount it just based on like, well, it's difficult so I don't like it, it's like you can't have both, I think, right? Where it's like, oh, this stuff's too easy and also it's too hard. It's like, well, okay, I mean, I guess that just means that like you wanted a game that was like the least common denominator of things in this game fed to you in an order that was like pre-specified or something. I don't know, but like I don't think that's a better game, because part of what's good about the game is that it doesn't feed you things in a specific order, and that you have the choice of like doing other things rather than banging your head on the same thing that you're stuck on forever. It's like a game that has a lot of variety and is very rewarding for your exploration, and that's like part of what's fun about the game. I don't know.
Puzzle from the roof that unlocks from another puzzle, but not before they put some suspicious looking shadows nearby to trick you into thinking they're the real hint, when in reality it's a sun glare panel like in the desert. This one is pretty mean. But then this area also had one of the best moments in the entire game for me when it uses colored lights in a closed off room. You have to change the colors, and well, I tried not to rely on pen and paper much while I played, but I think this might be one of the few cases where it's impossible not to use it. If someone out there did this by memory, then
I would also like to clarify, this did not click with me for a long time. I did not realize that you could change the color of the light for a long time. Even though it tries to make it very clear that you can do that, I didn't realize that for a long time. So I was stuck here, right? I was just like, I don't know. Nothing I can do works, right? I just didn't recognize that I could change the color. I thought I was supposed to like divine something somehow without any further information. But I definitely used, I think the first time I did this, I think I just Photoshop screenshotted it once I realized that you could change the color and just merged them together. But you can definitely do it with pen and paper also, right? So
I'm incredibly impressed that robots have gotten so good to pass as humans. For me, I found it very satisfying to write out a grid and make a rule about all the symbols reacting to each color. The puzzles aren't pushovers after this either, so it was a great challenge. I did some of these after finishing the game. You only need to complete 7 areas to get to the end, 7 of the 11 laser boxes that you open after doing enough puzzles in each location. This unlocks the way into the mountain and through the final sequence of puzzles. I really enjoyed this area, to the point that you might be thinking right now, well shit Joe, you said you were conflicted, but so far you sure are gushing a lot. I know, and we'll get to that, I promise. I want to be fair and show what the game does well just as much as it does badly. The puzzles begin to disintegrate in this area. By that I mean the rules that surround them begin to crumble. This could be seen as artificial difficulty by some, since panels will be covered to obscure your view, or will be moving to make it awkward, but these were straightforward enough that it was a cool twist. It was the puzzles farther in that I really enjoyed. The series with the broken colors that I had to use my hands to block some of them on my monitor to see which ones flashed in the same pattern was pretty good. The row that has you solving new puzzles but with the same line was even better, and it's capped off with the dual light bridge, which is what I consider to be one of the best balanced puzzles in terms of creativity and challenge. The final rooms with the shapes on the floor and the pillars aren't as good, but they provide something new at the end that isn't a grand enough departure to corrupt concepts you've already been taught. Then you leave the angelic looking area in a pearly elevator and fly over the island for what will be the end of the game for some people. That's most of the gameplay in this game. For those who have played The Witness a lot and are wondering, I did continue playing and see the hidden ending and completed the challenge cave with the timed music gauntlet. I got this ending with the elevator in about 25 hours with 380 puzzles solved and 38 of the environmental patterns found. I played for another 25 hours after that for almost 100% completion. My thoughts from here get a little less structured. I have to talk about the game's creator and the story, as well as tying into those environmental puzzles. I know this video is long, so if you want to take a break and come back to it, now would be the time.
Take a break. Actually, I am going to refill my cup, but yeah, I was kind of thinking that. I was like, it's barely structured at all, but all right. I mean, it's not satisfying as criticism and it's not satisfying as analysis. That's really like my viewpoint on it, because as analysis it's extremely shallow, and as criticism it's just too much of like yeah, I wish I got most of the video left. It's just kind of a rant about things in the game and the experience that he had with the game, with a little bit of very slight discussion about how people talk about the game, or like some kind of meta reaction to the conversation around the game, or something. I don't know. Anyway, let's keep going.
I don't think it's right for me to speak in detail about this game without discussing its creator. The Witness was developed by Thekla Incorporated, but it's Jonathan Blow that you'll hear most often attributed to the game's creation. There are two reasons that I feel obligated.
What's that thing? It's like the War Inspector thing. Games are way too often attributed to one person, says the Witness creator, Jonathan Blow.
To bring him up. The first, less important reason is that Jonathan Blow is one of many people that got me thinking about making this YouTube channel. I've watched several of the talks he has given and been consistently impressed by what he has to say. The second, more important reason is that everyone else who speaks about the game can't seem to avoid bringing him up either, and why that's happening ties directly into how I feel about this game. The fact of the matter is that if you're interested enough in video games to be watching a video on my channel, then you've probably heard of Jonathan Blow, and that alone is significant. How many other game developers have you really heard of more than once? I'd wager that most gaming enthusiasts would struggle to name the same amount of game directors as the equivalent person could about film. These names are rarely brought up in discussion. Assuming that I'm wrong, Jonathan Blow is the guy who made Braid, a 2D puzzle platformer that came out way back.
Assuming that I'm wrong. Just some the bad prose in here.
Back in 2008. Many people claimed it was one of the most important games to be released that year, and it was the first game that really proved that indie titles could be truly worth your time. I don't necessarily agree with all that. I played Braid the same month it came out, and I remember it fondly, but not as a big event in gaming. I think I've gotten more out of Jonathan Blow's presentations than his games, and that's why I'm really hesitant to say what I'm about to say. It's why I said in the opening about how I just need to be honest. The reason I just explained everything there about Braid, its reception, and people talking about The Witness is that I can't shake the feeling that Jonathan Blow is fucking with us. I have three big reasons for thinking this, and I'll start with what I think is the strongest one. The Witness is a glorified tablet game that does little to justify its $40 price tag when it comes to gameplay. And I know you might be thinking, how can he say that after he just got done praising so much of it? And you're right that it's contradictory, but I still would have enjoyed the vast majority of this game just as much if the panels had been presented to me in a selection screen on a tablet interface that also cost $10. Drawing the lines would have arguably been easier with that interface too. There simply aren't enough times that the game...
Well, luckily, there's now a tablet version of The Witness, although it didn't sell as well, so I think the truth has been borne out on that one. I mean, obviously, this is the kind of stupid thing that's just, like, so asinine that, like, I don't even know, like, why I should even justify it with a response, but obviously I'm here to respond to the video. People want me to respond to it, but, like, this is just like not even engaging with the game deeply enough to understand what it's trying to do. Like, okay, yes, of course, right. Someone would spend almost a decade of their life to just fuck with people by making a game that could have been a much cheaper, worse game, I guess, is the argument that he's making. I don't know. I mean, it's an argument that comes from not actually even understanding the game or appreciating what it is trying to do, right?
Game uses its environment in ways that justify it being a big 3D adventure. Even some of the areas that do, like the desert and temple sections, could have been simulated with clever ways on a tablet. The environment isn't used enough. Nothing proves this more than when the game does start using it, toward the end when The Witness finally starts feeling like an actual video game, right before you're done and kicked out. The mountain section is fantastic, just...
Yeah, I do think it's funny, right? The meta of this, that it's like, I mean, it kind of sounds to me like you're just trolling. Like, this is not even like a real serious opinion. That's all what you mean about less structured, is like, I'm actually going to have even less to back up what I'm going to say now. It's going to be entirely vibes based and not based in reality. And to be fair, I didn't even react to that about emulating the thing. This is another one of those things where it's like you can't just say shit. Like, I think it would have been easy to do this and then like not give an idea of how that would actually work. Like, you clearly don't actually think it would be easy. You just think like, in theory, maybe I'm right. And so you want to hand wave away the criticism that, well, it wouldn't work with like, well, I think it would work. And it's like, well, but give some evidence as to why you think it would work or why you would think that that would be better. As it is, it's like you're just speaking from a position of ignorance on what the game even is, right? Which, you know, it's fine to be ignorant, but again, this is the whole thing I said about noise pollution, and I'm generating more information pollution right now by doing this. But, you know, I do know a lot about The Witness, so maybe it's not totally just noise, but yeah, it's fine to talk about your feelings. But the problem is that the video frames it as though he is being an arbiter of taste and telling you whether or not you should play the game because you might enjoy it or whatever. But instead, he's just ranting. That's all the video really is. Which, like I said, is sort of information pollution, to just do a video where you just rant about a thing. And, you know, I say this as somebody who's done podcasts where I ranted about things. I might feel more guilty if those podcasts had been like the number one thing on the internet about that thing. Then I maybe would have felt bad about putting that stuff out there. But because it was like I'm ranting about Harry Potter and how I didn't like the end of it, and it's 10 years later and nobody cares, it was maybe fine and just amusing. But yeah, we're gonna try to not watch it in 1.5x speed, but yeah, at the current rate, this is gonna be a long thing.
Like the mazes in the fort elsewhere on the island. But what really stands out is the secret cave section that you unlock after you activate all 11 lasers. Even here, however, you see examples of the game not living up to its own world. There are lines of puzzle panels here that don't use the environment in any way. They're just there for you to move through, camera zoomed in what might as well be a tablet game anyway. After you get through here, you arrive at a section where you're timed and have to learn to move through a series of randomized puzzles. There's a maze that I think you have to learn by looking at an earlier puzzle board, but I'm not sure. Remembering where the line picked up the symbol seemed to help me get through it. The music playing is your time limit and urges you to rush. Movement between panels is important, as is frantically remembering all the lessons that the game has taught you. This was my favorite part of the game. I felt challenged in so many different ways. I felt like I had conquered something when I beat it. And then the game was over. The Witness boasts that it has over...
Okay. I'm trying to parse it because it's become so unstructured that it's hard to parse, because it's like, I thought we were talking about how the game should have been a tablet game and trying to make some argument about that. And now we're talking about how you liked the challenge, but you weren't entirely sure how it worked. It's like, okay. I guess we dropped that topic. But, you know, that's just me probably expecting him to actually provide any evidence that it would have been a good idea to make it a tablet game, whereas instead he just wanted to say that, which is like, okay, great, like now that's out there. Maybe, I don't know, I'm having to read his mind to understand what his own video is trying to say. But let's see if maybe what he's going to say about it having 500 puzzles ties back into the tablet thing, or some overall point that he's making.
500 puzzles, when I'd say that barely more than 100 truly utilize the world constructed around them in an interesting way. That some of the draw a straight line panels count toward that advertised number is also insulting. And what can I say about that environment? That it's beautiful, that it ties into the rest of the game's theme on perspective.
Oh, I could have gotten a screenshot of that for the card instead of the little low-res thumbnail thing. Okay. So he's very obsessed and insulted by the over 500 puzzles thing, that it counts puzzles that are whatever, and the game has like another like, I don't even remember. It's got like 60 more puzzles than that or something, right? So like over 500 is not 502. Like it's kind of underselling how many puzzles there are in it. So even if you said, well, this doesn't really count because it's like a map, or this doesn't really count because it's just a thing that opens the door, it's like, okay, there's like 23, right? It's like, so it's still like, how many of those are there? But in any case, it's like, I don't know, other than like, you could have not said that, but people are going to ask you anyway about that thing. You know, I didn't say that kind of thing other than like on Twitter about Taiji, like how many puzzles there were. And at a certain point, I stopped even giving up the number, right? Because it was like, oh, I want to be a little mysterious about how many there are. Which is also why it says over 500, because you want to be mysterious about it, but there's a lot. And I think it's fair to say The Witness has a lot of puzzles in it. So, I don't know, like 500 is a number that people don't know how to process, other than it seems like a lot. And the game seems like it has a lot of puzzles when you play it, right? So I don't know, right? If it had less than 500, then I think it would be false advertising. But complaining that like the game has some puzzles that are trivial and some puzzles that are easy and also some puzzles that are very hard, and that it's not 500 like average difficulty puzzles or something, seems kind of like a really weird criticism. I don't know.
That some of the draw a straight line panels count toward that advertised number is also insulting.
I mean, it's the same, like, okay, I'm working on this lecture, right? Working on a puzzle design lecture that will be coming out at some point, right? And I'm posting on Twitter the slide count, right? Which I don't even remember what it is right now. Because the goal is not to have a really long talk with a lot of slides. I just think it's funny that the thing has become insanely long. The goal was to just like cover all I thought that I could contribute relevantly in a constructive fashion to that subject of game design, right? Or puzzle game design, right? In particular. So that happens to be a lot of things. If I want to try to cover those things well and accurately and cover like caveats and make it all make sense, it's not an advertisement. It's not a like, yeah, more slides is better, right? Like, because you could have a talk that had a lot of slides for no reason. I just think it's funny that it's really long because I'm actually not trying to make it insanely long. It's just ending up being long. So it's amusing.
And what can I say about that environment? That it's beautiful, that it ties into the rest of the game's theme on perspective, outlooks or point of views, whatever you want to call them. The island is crammed with hidden images that you can only see from certain angles, roots that become fish in the water's reflection, a person hiding in a burned hut, statues reaching for each other. I think I might have started seeing things that weren't even there toward the end. These trees began to look like the foreign people to me from certain angles. The place is carefully structured to only reveal things if you're looking at it right, seeing the same thing you've already looked at, but seeing some.
So I realized that it was really an enjoyable part of the game that I was like looking around at the environment and seeing things and noticing things there. But nevertheless, I think it's just Jonathan Blow fucking with me, because it should have just been a tablet game with just a linear series of puzzles probably, and it should have like not done any of this other stuff. I don't know, whatever.
Completely new, just like when you finally see the solution in a puzzle. This is what The Witness is all about, but all this beauty isn't worth how much wasteful panel staring you'll be doing in the game. But what about the
This guy is just like the master of like talking out of both sides of his mouth here. Like, really? It's like every fucking thing. It's like the puzzles are too hard. The puzzles are too easy. There's too many puzzles. There's not enough puzzles. There's too much staring at puzzles. There shouldn't be an environment because I spend too much time staring at puzzles. It's like, what? I mean, I would like a version of The Witness that was just like environmental puzzles. This is like an idea in my head, right? That I think is interesting, but I haven't figured out how to make that game design work. But I don't know. It's just not like even, it's not even like coherently framed. It's just, it hurts. It hurts my brain. All right.
Environmental puzzles, the circles you find in the island that you can draw shapes from, the holy shit moment that I mentioned in the first part of this video. These are hidden in the same way as all of these images, and the way that they've been placed, somehow obvious and camouflaged at the same time, is often nothing short of genius. Some people might argue that finding these patterns is the actual real game in The Witness, and that the panels are just a distraction place to keep you busy until you finally start looking at the world around you. I don't think it's as extreme as that. I think they're both equally important. I think the message the game is trying to convey and what passes as a story has more to do.
Oh my god. The talking out of both sides of the mouth is so annoying. It's like you can't say both things and be fucking straight-faced about it. It's just stupid, right? You can't be like, I think that the environmental puzzles are equally as important as the other part of the game. And also, this should have just been a collection of line puzzles on a tablet, and Jonathan Blow is fucking with us by putting it on an island. Because it's like wasting our time. But also, it's wasting our time looking at the puzzles. What are you even saying? Oh my god. What the fuck?
With the environmental puzzles, but we'll get to that. The problem with that holy shit moment is that I only enjoyed finding these circles and lines as I explored the island on my own terms. It felt great to notice them and figure out how to start each one, although some of them requiring you to run so far away on the island was borderline absurd.
I mean, I know ChatGPT didn't exist at the time that he wrote this essay, but I mean, honestly, ChatGPT is not even the more coherent. Jesus. All right. Just fucking randomly generate an essay about The Witness.
By the time I hit 50 hours, I had solved about 515 puzzles and found 75 of these hidden circles and lines. My goal was now to hunt for them, to search specifically for them on the island. And that's when the holy shit became just shit. This was tedious because of the size of the island and how many different ways you can look at something. You need to find a circle to start it, and some of these are only ever visible when you found the whole thing. By that I mean, sometimes you can see parts of a circle and work out roughly where to explore, but there are puzzles that the only way to find them are to stumble upon them by luck or just going literally everywhere on the island and looking at everything. I did not finish this part of the game by myself. My gut reaction.
Okay, so he didn't figure out that there's like a hint to try to tell you where they are, is what he's saying, right? He didn't realize that there was like something to help you do the final cleanup, right? Instead, he just assumed that you're supposed to search everywhere just randomly and that the game doesn't help you with this at all, rather than like looking for something in the game that might help you. I mean, okay, fine, right? That's your experience of the game. But it is there to help you find the things, right? And for people that don't know, right, the obelisks do show you the direction generally where to look in, right? So the side of the obelisk, it's, you know, it's like a hexagon or something, or an octagon, I can't remember. But the side of it, if you head out in that direction, then it's in that direction, right? So that narrows down roughly like each. There's a slice here, you know, it's somewhere there, right? And you know what you're looking for, right? So Is that, does that mean that you don't have to spend some time looking around? No, but it does help you clean up when you only have a few of these left, right? So that you're not like looking around, only seeing things that you've already seen, hoping that you get lucky, right? Because it's like, well, I can narrow the search area by like 1 to 1/8 of what it was, right? Anyway. Yeah, is it enough is a fair question. Is it too subtle for players to maybe notice? I think no, because I think that like at the point that you start trying to clean up, by which I mean you're trying to get the last few of these, it starts to become apparent that you need something to help you do that. And the place to look for any kind of hint on that would be the obelisks. Because that's where already the ones you haven't gotten are listed, which is some kind of hint about what you're looking for, right? But so then it just makes sense, considering the kind of game this is, that you should like scrutinize that and see if you notice anything else about it, right? But, you know, all of these are natural consequences of the general design decision that the game made, which is like to try to push non-verbally communicating the entire game as far as you could possibly take it, right? That's just one of the design goals of The Witness. So that means that things like telling you in words that this thing does this thing was just off the table. And you can criticize that design goal, right? You can say like, well, I don't actually think that that's good or worthwhile, but I think that the game undoubtedly pushed game design forward, so I would argue that it was a very important thing to do, right? To try to push on that as hard as you possibly could. And then you can do other things, right? Then you don't have to do that. You don't have to do you don't have to do the entire movie that's in first person perspective, because somebody else already did that. Or whatever, right? Okay.
Reaction is that this isn't meant to be something you really do alone, and is a communal project that the game has for fans to pool solutions together to complete the 6 obelisks around the island. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but so many of these are so obscure that I don't know how one person is reasonably meant to find them all. So you have a game that went to the trouble of
His example is that one.
using it in a truly engaging way. You have a main game mechanic that would be better suited for a phone or a tablet game, and only teases at the possible potential it could hold at the end, just before it's over. It's possible that there's more to find in the game that continues this trend, some super secret area of more puzzle gauntlets. But after being available for 2 months, either this secret is...
Why would you put that clip in? Why would you put that clip in? Oh my god. Why would you put the clip of you fumbling to click the fucking circle in the video? You're just asking for it. Oh my god. Again, we all fumble to click the circle sometimes, but like, why would you put it in the video? You choose what clips to put in. All right.
too well hidden, or people far smarter than I am decided they didn't care enough to find it. Either way is a failing on the game, if such a secret exists at all. The second reason I think that Jonathan Blow might be fucking with us isn't as strong, but in my opinion, it's worse than...
Wait. What? That was a reason? I don't even understand how it was, like, coherently stated. Huh? That was just, like, rambling for, like, 10 minutes. I guess that it could have been a tablet game? Was that the thing? Okay.
What I just said. It requires us to take a trip to the game's Steam page. The Witness is a single-player game in an open world with dozens of locations to explore and over 500 puzzles. The game respects you as an intelligent player and treats your time as precious. There's no filler. Each of those puzzles brings its own new idea into the mix, so this is a game full of ideas. This paragraph was the spark that convinced me that something fucked up is going on with this game. There's enough said here that's demonstrably untrue, so blatantly wrong that the person who wrote it is either delusional or a liar. The game is full of filler puzzles, but the worst thing here is this part. While the game definitely does treat you as an intelligent, inquisitive person, by no metric does this game treat your time as precious. There are several key points that the opposite is true. I read this on the Steam page before I started playing.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Again, it's like state things as though they're like obvious when they're not. So it's like, okay, what is the filler? Is the filler the line puzzle that you drew that opened a gate that cleverly told me that I needed to, like, I could solve the puzzles from a distance by looking through something, but now I'm going to turn around and criticize it and say that it's a filler puzzle. It's like, okay. I mean, we all know where this one's gonna go. This is the only fucking thing I even remembered from this video because it's so asinine, but, you know, whatever.
It kept flashing in my head as I stood around waiting for platforms to move, or boats to arrive, or puzzle solutions to trigger their infuriatingly slow animation.
I've tried to not be nitpicky about his mispronouncing of words, other than the one time when he had a word on the screen that he misspelled. Mostly because I think that it's very obvious and it's also a low blow, right? And I'm not here to just make low blows, if at all possible. I'm here to, like, try to be fair to the video as best as I can, but also, you know, people want me to get annoyed at it, and it is annoying. The start of it, I was a little worried. I was like, maybe this isn't going to be annoying enough. No, it gets much worse. So let's back up a sec.
There are several key points that the opposite is true. I read this on the Steam page before I started playing, and it kept flashing in my head as I stood around waiting for platforms to move, or boats to arrive, or puzzle solutions to trigger their infuriatingly slow animations on nearby objects. Your character's movement speed is about half of what it should be, even when you're holding down a button to run around. It's made even worse by all of the invisible walls all over the place. I understand why you can't jump, since it would let you get to places that you otherwise shouldn't to break some of the environmental puzzles, but that you can't slide down most ledges or bumps or buildings is really tiring. My guess is that there was no teleport function or really fast movement speed because they wanted players to have more chances to see some of the perspective tricks the island pulls as they backtrack all over it. This isn't a good enough reason to not make things a little easier to get around though. Many of the better shortcuts around the island don't open until the very end. Nothing proves this more than some
Okay. I mean, I just disagree with that point. Like, it is a good enough reason. Like, it's you can feel like it isn't, but it is a good enough reason. Because there's many things like this bridge that he's complaining about right now, or he's showing in his video and saying, like, look how slow this bridge is. That is slow until it's not, right? Until you're trying to do the environmental puzzle here, and then it's too fast, right? And I've covered this many times because, like I said, it's the only thing I really remembered about this video. But this is kind of a stupid point, because you could then say something, right? You would obviously then say, well, yeah, but there's elevators that are slow that don't have environmental puzzles, and they shouldn't be that slow. And it's like, yeah, but if only the things that had environmental puzzles were slow, then it would immediately be a clue that, oh, there must be an environmental puzzle here. This thing's really slow, right? So instead, it's like a deliberate thing about the game that these things move kind of slowly, so that when something's like this, it doesn't stand out. And there's no clue other than you would be trying to look for the thing, right? So if you've done some of these puzzles, then you know, like, when I'm doing those puzzles, I wish this was slower. So, you know, maybe there could have been something where you had a function in the game to, like, slow down and speed up time or something, but I don't know. I do think it's worth it because although it is inconvenient when you're just trying to go from point A to point B, the game expects you to, like, experience things, and that means that, like let's say like warping around would be like out of the question, because that's just not how you like experience things in real life or whatever, right? It's trying to be like realistic in a way. But anyway, I'll let him keep going on, because there's definitely like, this is going to be a long thing, and there's a lot of things that he's going to say, and without me just going on a rant about this thing for forever, right?
The environmental patterns you have to find, and among them is one of the most tedious wastes of time that I have ever had to do in any game. Around the island are some of the more difficult puzzles that block your way to a pattern drawn on a piece of paper. I think you're meant to draw this yourself out of game for later. That's what I did. There are 6 of these. The final one is your reward for finishing the time
No, bro, you're supposed to just remember it in your mind palace.
challenge in the bottom of the mountain. These are codes that you enter in a theater room underground, roughly in the middle of the island. A video starts playing for each code you enter. 6 codes, 6 videos.
Well, that's no better a solution than any of the others, is it?
Now, I'm going to discuss these in detail in the last section, but I want to point something specific out about some of them. There are circles hidden in these videos. Some of them are what I consider to be the most brilliant environmental patterns in the game. The ones in the James Burke video, where you use parts of circles on the screen with parts outside of it, were fantastic moments of discovery. I first noticed the circle at the end of the candle video, which you need to run out of the theater to complete by drawing the line where the screen is broken in the back. After you've entered the code, you can skip through to any point in the video to make these easier to complete. Some of these videos are longer than others. The James Burke one is about 5 minutes. The candle one feels just over twice as long as that. Another is a 10-minute video that are 2 clips of Richard Feynman. There's also one by Rupert Spira that goes on for over half a fucking hour. Now, I've watched videos like these before on my own time, especially interviews with Richard Feynman, but even enjoying them as I do, they have no place taking up so much time in this game, especially since Rupert Spira is obviously insane given what he says over the course of 35 odd minutes. The video that is your reward for completing the time.
I mean, there's a lot of things in this where it's just like, these aren't even worth really justifying with a response, because it's just like, you're just showing your ass, so whatever.
The puzzle is just shy of an hour long. It's called The Secret of Psalm 46 by Brian Moriarty. Was it interesting? Yes. Would I have preferred to watch it when I actually wanted to watch a video instead of play a game? An even bigger yes. I can't really justify turning it off and walking away either, since it was clearly important enough to the developers to include it in the game. But that's not the real time waste here. There's a pattern puzzle hidden in this video. You need to run around the back and use the moon on the screen as your starting position to get it going. Then you draw a line from white to where it mingles with black on the ceiling, and then complete it with the moon once again when it reaches the far side of the screen, 56 or so minutes later. You cannot fast forward this. You can't skip ahead like the other puzzles. You need to start the pattern at the beginning of the video, and you need to stand there with the line active waiting for the end. My screensaver tripped on 3 times while I was doing this. You have my sympathies if you watch the video once all the way through before.
Why is your screensaver coming on when you're playing a game? What? Also, why do you have a screensaver?
Or realizing this was in the game and then had to watch it again. I cannot resolve the conflict of many things in this game with things said on the store page or by Jonathan Blow outside of it. I can't resolve it with the prior work that was done in Braid either. This part is so outrageous that I can't even think of this without seeing.
Sorry that the subtitles are hard to read, because there's subtitles in the game also. I mean, I don't know. You know, some of these points, it's just like, it's just kind of an anti-art point that he's making, right? Like, he clearly just doesn't believe in the idea of art, so okay. It's like, you didn't try to like actually understand why it is the way that it is, or you know, why the creators of the game would think that something was this important. You know, like the reason that this lecture is so important in this game, and that if you want to super complete the game, Jonathan Blow expects you to actually listen to the thing, is because it's like the fucking Rosetta Stone to understanding the entire game. It's not just a random fucking video. Like, this is the fucking thing that was the inspiration for this entire video game, right? Like, if you want to know, like, anything about this game and you're trying to appreciate it as a work of art, then like, here you go. Here's something that will help a lot, right? So, you know, you could argue, well, I don't like the choice that you have to do. You have to like sit here to do this environmental puzzle. But it's there for that reason, right? And it's true, I didn't realize there was an environmental puzzle the first time I watched it, and so I had to watch it again later to do the environmental puzzle. But I didn't just like, oh god, well, immediately I'm gonna have to do this, so I guess I'll go like cook dinner for the next 3 weeks while this thing's happening on mute or something, right? Because I'm not a crazy person, and instead I'm just like, I'll just wait until I want to listen to the thing again. Like, huh? Okay. Whatever. I don't know. I mean, if you listen to the whole thing and you didn't like it, then maybe it's a valid thing, right? You're like, I don't want to ever listen to that again. Thank God it's over or whatever, right? I mean, I also think if you think Rupert Spira is crazy, then you're probably never going to understand The Witness. But hey, whatever. So the whole thing about Rupert Spira is like a bit of a tangent that I probably shouldn't go on because it's not like I have a huge dog in that fight, but people have extremely different reactions to Rupert Spira based on their personality and based on, I think, how they feel about the things that he says, right? I have heard people say these kind of things before where they think he's a crazy person. And then there's other people that, and it was surprising to me actually sometimes, the people who had a strong positive reaction to him, because it's not even necessarily the kind of people that you would expect, right? Certainly it requires experience with meditation, but it depends on the kind of meditation you're doing also, whether you understand what he's saying or not, right? Like either what he's saying is like obviously true from first principles, or you have no idea what he's talking about, right? So the reason that it is in the game, right, is because Rupert Spira represents a perspective that is analyzing from first principles what it is like to be a conscious being. So it is taking a very like principled analysis of what that experience is like and saying things that are only the things that you know to be true from that perspective, right? But sometimes people don't get it and they think, oh, the guy sounds kind of like he's a cult leader or whatever. And he has a certain slow way of talking that I understand that's why people feel that way. And it's not even really a judgment on Rupert Spira as a person or anything. Like I said, I don't have a dog in that fight, but I'll give that's my 2 cents on that without derailing us too far because it's already taking us forever to get through this video. And I think we got 30 minutes left. Okay, which is going to take longer, but all right.
Proof that he's fucking with us, or can't keep his own facts straight when he considers not wasting a player's time as a core component of game design. So finally, why would he do that? Why would he fuck with us?
Okay. Before he moves on to that, because I have to address this point about the whole not wasting time thing, because it's like I said, it's the only thing I remembered about this video because it's so stupid, right? It's like, okay, if you're gonna talk about Jonathan Blow and be like, John's fucking with us and da-da-da-da, and I've watched his lectures and blah, 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 then like, you should at least try to understand why does he think lots of games waste his time, right? It's not because they have slow moving fucking elevators, right? It's because they like take too long to get to the good part, or they have like too much of the same thing copied and pasted over the game to just like make it longer because longer game is better or whatever, right? So when he says that it's not wasting his time, he's trying to say like it's all killer, no filler, right? That's sort of what he's trying to say. Now, obviously, you can argue, well, I think that this is filler or whatever, which was like the point that he made that he didn't even try to justify because he seemed to think it was self-evident. Joseph Anderson, I mean, not Jonathan Blow. So that's what John means, is like, I tried to, as much as possible in designing this game, just give you the good stuff, right? We're going to get to the good stuff, and it's just going to be good stuff. That's what he means when he says not wasting your time, not that there's no slow moving bridge or you can warp around everywhere or whatever, right? It's like, well, part of what the game wants to give you is this experience of going around on this island, and you might notice something as you're going from place to place that you didn't notice the last time that you did that or whatever, and that requires that you have to like do that, and it is in the general milieu, to use the $27 word, of the game, that it wants to try to make something that you can relate to your real life experience, and that means that the game has to be kind of realistic in some ways. And so this point earlier about where I said you could say, well, maybe you should be able to speed up time, right? Like in the upcoming Tekla game, that's a thing you can do. You can speed up or slow down time when you're doing the puzzles, right? Because it might make it easier to do something, or less tedious, right? Or whatever. But in the case of The Witness, it's like, it's very specific that like you don't live your life in sped up, slow down time. I press a button to do that, right? You don't live your life with like a soundtrack in the background, right? That's like why there's not a soundtrack in the background in the game, right? I mean, there's a little bit of artistic interpretation occasionally of the ambiance in order to create a certain like mood, but it's subtle enough that it could reasonably be the ambiance, right? The only exception to that maybe is kind of the cathedral-y type thing right at the end, where it's like the most violating that, because it just needs to give you a sense of like that it's building to the end, and the only way to really do that was like to do some audio stuff, right? But in any case, the general vibe of the game was to try to be very like realistic, by which I don't necessarily mean photorealistic, but just like true to life, right? Like, this is what it's like in real life when you're looking around. And we tried to accurately duplicate those things in the game, because we want the things that you think about in the game to be things that you can think about in your real life outside of the game, rather than just being, oh, I know more things about The Witness, right? Anyway. Why would John fuck with us?
The clearest reason I can think of is that he's like a hugely popular band that's sick to death of playing the song that made them. Their breakout hit that fans scream for, that they play by the numbers each night, dying a little as they do. Braid was such a hit and is heralded as so important by so many critics and reviewers that he could justify a permanent name change to Jonathan Blown. I could see the appeal of making a game and then adding so many things to it just to see what I could get away with. What are people going to call me on? Are people even paying attention, or are they just going to like whatever I do now because it's me who does it?
This is like the most classic, like, I don't understand a work of art take ever, right? Like, I don't even understand what this guy's doing, so he must just be like trolling. He must just be like fucking with it. I don't like this band's new album, so they must just have made it just personally to fuck with me. Ay. All right.
Authors have done similar things in the past with pseudonyms. It's the only thing I can think of that can make all of these awkward pieces fit together.
Have you considered that you just don't get it? That maybe there's something in your life that you're not yet capable of understanding? Have you considered that? Clearly no, right? Ay, ay, ay. All right, all right.
Parts of this game are genius, and I love just enough of it that I don't consider myself cheated, but it's close, and I can't speak for everyone, but something is rotten in this game, and I hope that I've put my finger on what it is with this video, because I
You definitely put your finger in something.
have no desire to ever play The Witness again. I have one more section to go through, a final look at perspective and story. Like last time, if you want to take a break from watching this, now's the time. There's no circle burning above your head that you have to babysit for this video.
That's right. That's all you do there is babysit the circle. Babysit the circle, alt tab to another window, and watch a Joseph Anderson essay, which is probably the same length.
Some people have criticized the game for its lack of a story. I don't think that's fair, but the issue is surprisingly complicated. First off, are they even right? Does The Witness have a story? The answer is clearly no, it doesn't. But it does have an answer to what's happening on the island. So in a sense, there's something...
Okay. Let me give it a second. Guy who doesn't understand why The Witness is designed the way that it is then going to try to analyze the story, or why it is called what it is. Let's actually prep for that. I had to decompress a little bit after all of the just annoyance of that. Actually, you know what? Let's get some more tea. It's time for more tea. My ice is melted. I gotta get more ice even. Come for the criticism of whatever this is. If this is even criticism, this is just me reaction content, the lowest form of content. And stay for the tea. God. I mean, it's just the fucking IQ bell curve meme. It really is, you know, where you have like on the ends of the meme is like, I guess I just don't get it. In the center of the meme, the thing is like, did the top fall over or not at the end of Inception? Anyway. Okay.
Some people have criticized the game for its lack of a story. I don't think that's fair, but the issue is surprisingly complicated. First off, are they even right? Does The Witness have a story? The answer is clearly no, it doesn't. But it does have an answer to what's happening on the island, so in a sense there's something close to a narrative to discover. What's going on? Through playing the game to its real ending, you get the answer to that question. Some people have further criticized the game for having no reward structure. Usually this is tied to the same problem people have with the story. Many said they felt like they were solving puzzles for no real reason, whereas in another game they'd usually be given some tidbits of story or character building or whatever you'd prefer. I also don't think this is fair. Some games use rewards to keep you playing, but not every game has to. If you need something like that to keep you playing, then I think that's a sign of the core gameplay failing to engage you.
Sorry, cat was distracting me too much.
Your reward in these types of games is simply more gameplay, with more challenge and fresh twists. I think The Witness mostly delivers on this front. Although I heavily criticized it in the last section for not using its world, I also said that I would have still enjoyed the puzzles on a tablet. They were still good, just not worth a 10 out of 10 perfect score or anything. The two sides to the narrative in The Witness are the different perspectives that you experience while playing it, and that the game
I'm just kind of like, what? I still don't understand this point. Like, I don't understand if we're saying that it would be better if it was a tablet, or we're just saying I would have enjoyed these puzzles even if they were a tablet. Like, is this a criticism or not? I don't really get it. Because earlier you said that it was proof that Jonathan Blow was fucking with us, which suggests to me that you consider it a criticism. But then you're like, I would have enjoyed them anyway, but the puzzles were not good enough that if it was just a tablet game that I would have thought it was a 10 out of 10. So are you saying that it's better that it is not just a tablet game because that makes it better than it would have been if it was just those puzzles? I still don't understand this point. I'm spending too much time on this, but whatever.
is about a game. It's a meta story that has a fictional dev team that has made the island and the puzzles and the like, and that you are one of those developers who is playtesting it. Whether or not you are doing so safely or with the rest of the team knowing is questionable, but I don't.
Uh, that's not exactly what's going on in the story, right? They're not making a game. They're like making a immersive like simulation thing that's meant to change like people's perceptions. Now, yes, you're right that it's like a metafiction thing, right? Where the fiction in the world is sort of like a parallel to the reality of the game that you're actually playing, and what they were trying to do with it. But it's not just like play testing, right? They're like seeing if it creates a change in your consciousness or something, right? That's what they're trying to do, which is a little bit different in their goal rather than just like play testing straightforwardly, which would be something like, oh, do people enjoy the game or whatever, right? Like when you play test a game, that's what you're doing mostly, is trying to see, I mean, you are trying to see whether it works, but also like, do people enjoy it or not, right? And because this game is like an art game, it sort of has like higher goals than just that. And so the metafiction like points more directly at those higher order goals rather than the lower order thing of just like, did you enjoy the puzzles or whatever, right? And part of this concept, right, is that you could only get out of the simulation once you had the change of consciousness, right? Like you're going in and you're staying in there until you figure out the secret exit, right? So I don't know.
Don't really care enough to find out. That's the answer to the island. That's why there are puzzles. You have no memory because you have a rebirth of sorts when you enter the program. There are some hints that the whole thing is meant to be able to teach you something. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Let's pause for a second and talk about stories. I want to pull them all together and make 4 different categories and make a very simplified chart that every story ever written can be put into. So on one side we have the story that's being told. Is it a simple story or is it a complex story? That's all we want to know. We don't care what it's about or the characters or anything else other than, is it a simple narrative or a complicated one? Next up, we have the same 2 qualities but on a different part. Is this story told in a simple way or a complex way?
Sorry, I'm just laughing at Caitlin in chat, who's just like, oh no. Okay. I mean, this feels like a reverse reasoning from you know, it was like I don't even remember who it was. It was like Aristotle or something, right? It's like, he's probably going to get to that, but there's like some quote about like, you know, the mark of a good story is like a complex story simply told or whatever, right? And it's like, I mean, I guess. Sometimes there's wisdom in those things, you know. I took that wisdom of like the thing of like endings should feel both surprising and inevitable, right? Like this is a general wisdom thing, right, that applies to stories. And like if you're doing puzzle design where you kind of have a narrative element to the puzzles, right, none of which he talked about in this at all, but anyway, then you also need to do that. So I'm like, it feels like a reverse taxonomy based on this like kind of thing where you would be like surprising and inevitable. And it's like there are endings that are not surprising and they are arbitrary. And then there are endings that are surprising and inevitable. Then there are endings that are anyway, whatever, right? And so then you're like try to say something about that based on the taxonomy, and it's like, well, you're just saying the thing that the original thing said, right? Like there's no need to like expand it out further. It's unnecessary. The original thing already said that.
Does it have a straightforward, reliable narrator who doesn't mess around much with overly flowery language or go off on tangents and the like? Is it clearly told, or is it filled with lots of different information and complex paragraphs that are difficult to read with lots of wordplay, stuff like that? We're not interested in whether or not this is well done. We don't care for now. We just want to determine how the story is told. So with these categories, we can form 4 distinct types of stories. A simple story that is told in a simple way. A complex story that is told in a...
Yes, the story is this video is the simple story of I played a game called The Witness, and instead I'm going to like give you a taxonomy of storytelling as part of like trying to tell you how it made me feel, which was that I didn't like how it made me feel. Ay. All right, we'll try to let's try to not have too many maybe unnecessary low blows. Let's let him make his point.
Simple way. A complex story that is told in a complex way, and a simple story that is told...
Oh, even my structure of putting myself in the top right corner has fallen apart at this point. Oh well.
...in a complex way. 3 of these categories, in my mind, can work in wonderful ways. The best of them all is probably a complex story told in a simple way. Almost anyone can read it, and they can discover new things each time. That complexity is something that they can discover for themselves over multiple readings or viewings if it's a movie. A double helping of simple...
So, okay, wait a second. Is he acting like he invented this concept? Because I'm like, I think it was like Aristotle or somebody that said this. I mean, I'm an idiot and I don't know, but I at least know it's like old. This is not some new idea. Sorry, cat's meowing. I don't know whether you can hear it, but anyway.
...can be a relaxing experience, or one aimed at children, which isn't an insult by any means. People love simple, entertaining stories.
There's something in the corner that I can't see. Yes, apparently that's a word. What the fuck? Why do you put these things in the video? Why do you put the part where you're fumbling to click the thing? Like, what? Yes, apparently that's a word. Okay. All right.
...over new things each time. That complexity is something that they can discover for themselves over multiple readings or viewings if it's a movie. A double helping of simple can be a relaxing experience, or one aimed at children, which isn't an insult by any means. People love simple, entertaining stories. Complex stories told in a complex way are difficult to get right, since the complexity in both parts needs to be worth it. These can be train wrecks or masterpieces. They can often be studied. There's a lot to enjoy here when it's done well. Finally, we can draw one of the Witness's puzzle shapes to quarantine off a simple story told in a complex way. I'm not so arrogant to say that this can never work. I'm sure that it can in many ways, but this is the category that The Witness and many other pretentious stories like it falls into, and it's something that bothers me so much. The problem with...
I hate art. I hate art. It makes me mad. I mean, like I said, I always get annoyed because people throw around the word pretentious and really they just mean like I didn't get it. And fair enough, right? The difference between I didn't get it and it is actually pretentious, i.e. it's pretending to have depth that it doesn't actually have, is hard to tell if you don't get it, right? But anyway. What he means that it's complex is that he doesn't get it.
Many incredible books can come from how they're often difficult to read and fully understand, from Finnegan's Wake.
Finnegan's Wake mentioned. Yes, The Witness. It is much like Finnegan's Wake. Hi. All right.
Something like Catch-22, which some people can understandably struggle with. That's also my favorite book, by the way. This idea of complexity equals worth can be infectious. The idea takes root that in order for something to be worth your time, that it has to be difficult to understand in some way. These people are missing the point. The complexity needs to be worth it for something in the book, not for the sake of complexity itself. So you have so many stories that are intentionally obtuse. They don't like giving you information. They might even say that the mystery and wonder of knowing will always be more enjoyable than really finding out, which I think is bullshit since there's already enough to wonder at in the world. Although, again, I am certain that some exceptional stories could pull it off.
Oh, okay. I mean, like, who is saying this? Like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Like, who is saying these things? Nobody's saying this. Like, you're shadow boxing a thing in your head. It's like nobody's saying what you're saying. All I'm saying is, like, I guess you didn't get it. Because that seems obvious to me from your video. That's I unwilling to commit that it's a criticism or an analysis, but is framing it as though it's both, when it's really just a rant. But okay. The thing that artists tend to say, right, is there are things that you can communicate only in the way that they communicated it, right? You can only communicate this thing with the subtlety that it requires in the way that you communicated it, or else you would have communicated it some other way, right? You cannot boil it all down to a fucking, elevator pitch or whatever, right? You can't just explain what the witness means in an essay. Right? It's like the game is communicating the things to you the way that they are in the game. That's what it's about, right? Like, it's as simple as that. But this whole problem, right? This is what made me afraid to put story stuff in Taiji, and so I didn't. And then many people praise Taiji for that, even though I find it somewhat embarrassing that I was afraid to do it. Which is that people just focus on the fucking words, right? You put words in the game, people focus on the words, right? I talked about this in my What is a Witness Like essay, right? The whole thing about that, the parable of the Buddha who's pointing at the moon, and the unenlightened acolyte says, "What's so important about your finger?" Right? So it's the same thing, right? The witness has words in it because it wants to try to point you in the direction of, like, how you should maybe think about the things in the game in order to get the most out of the game. But a lot of people will, like, look at the words and think, like, that's what the game's about. It's about the words. It's like, it's unavoidable, right? But it's like, no, the game is about the things in the game that you're doing. That's what it's about. Okay, you got your wish. It's happening. Well, we're wrapping up. We've still got like 30 more minutes of this nonsense, and then I'm gonna have to, like, unfortunately do some editing on a video, because part of the thing for my recording, my high quality recording, I was not recording, and so I got to grab it from the stream in order to stitch it together. But those are technical things. Okay, I get it. The princess was an atomic bomb, and I'm Richard Feynman. I'm beating my wife. All right.
But the worst part of all of this is how it can lead to experiences that are impenetrable in two ways: comprehension and criticism. They're light on details and might even contradict themselves in order to appear deep. The result being something close to trying to hold on to a fish with epilepsy. You can't even begin to grasp it, which is when you're...
What? What? Okay. Let me back up. I know none of us want to have to hear this again, but I'm trying to understand what the fuck this guy is saying, and sometimes that's very hard. I don't know how far I need to go back. Hopefully this is far
more
enough.
enjoyable than really finding out, which I think is bullshit since there's
Okay.
already enough to wonder at in the world. Although, again, I am certain that some exceptional stories could pull it off. But the worst part of all of this is how it can lead to experiences that are impenetrable in two ways: comprehension and criticism. They're light on details and might even contradict themselves in order to appear deep. The result being something close to trying to hold on to a fish with epilepsy. You can't even begin to grasp it, which is when you're left with forming your own opinion, your own interpretation, because what could be more powerful than that? You get all this information and get to decide what it all means to yourself, to you, and you create this whole narrative that you like, because of course you're going to like it. You made it, so any nagging plot holes can be dismissed, all the while you're building a positive association with the piece of art that's making you do this. It's like forming a twisted relationship in a way. You're feeling so smart, a part of creating it. And if you like that sort of thing, then alright, I really don't. If I want to use
Hey, I will give him at least that. At least at the end there, he just said, all right, if you like that, fine, I don't, right? The annoying thing is that he's framing this as though somehow The Witness has like got a flaw in its storytelling approach. When really it's just, I just don't like this kind of story, right? I just don't like a thing that's like open-ended and I'm supposed to just think about it. I like easy answers, goddammit. I like the Maltese Falcon, goddammit. I like the Maltese Falcon. Don't give me none of that In a Lonely Place. I don't need that open-ended bullshit. So he's not wrong that The Witness is open-ended, right? It is open-ended. It is not prescriptive about what, for example, the meaning of life is, or the right perspective that you should look at life and the world and what it's like to be alive, right? Or, you know, what is the point of it, right? What is the fundamental atomic unit by which we should analyze the universe in order to understand the truth, whatever that is, the capital T truth, and what it's all about, right? It is agnostic about the answer to that, but instead provides you an encyclopedia of possible answers and different ways of looking at things. Maybe you don't like that kind of thing. That's fine, right? And so I'll give him credit for that. Although the rest of that paragraph, where he's talking about epileptic fish for some reason, sure just sounds like he's trying to criticize the thing. And again, like I said, my main annoyance with the thing is it's like, it's sort of all talks out of both sides of its mouth, where it's like you're not really wanting to like say that you're criticizing it, and you're not really wanting to say that it's a review, but you're framing it as though it's a criticism or a review because you're trying to say like you should or shouldn't play it, which means that you're being an arbiter of taste. I don't know. But I'll at least say, hey, at least he had some self-awareness there to acknowledge that some people might like that kind of thing. And it's like, all right, fine, right? You didn't like that kind of thing, but like I don't understand, right? I'm very much like, most of the video made me think that you didn't get the design of the game, right? Fundamentally, why it is the way that it is, what it's trying to do. And then like, so therefore the story doesn't seem natural to you, or the only story that would make sense for this kind of game. And instead you want the game to be something that it isn't. And it's like, okay, that's fine, but it's not really, it's definitely not it could be fair that like it's criticism of the Siskel and Ebert variety, where I give you that thumbs up whether I liked it or I didn't, right? But it's not super charitable criticism. But anyway, yeah, I agree. Like if The Witness told you like the meaning of life, you could play one video game and like it all made sense, then like it would really be worth the money. I don't want to watch anybody else's like negative witness reviews. Please don't pay me to do that. This is not exactly a enjoyable experience for me, but hopefully it's like useful or enjoyable to other people, right? All right, let's see. If I want to use my imagination to create a story, I'll go do that on my own. Okay.
Use my imagination to create a story, then I'll go do that on my own. When I experience a story, I want an actual story with answers and meaning and all the ramifications of those things.
I told you. I want answers, God damn it. I want simple stories. I like the Maltese Falcon.
The Witness does exactly this. It's a simple story about a man doing a beta test of a video game, and it's told with no information that even so much hints to that until you've already gotten the first ending.
Yes, that is what The Witness is about. It is a man doing a beta test for a video game. That's what it's about. I could have just read that on the Steam page and I wouldn't even have to buy the game. Damn. Nailed it.
The island resets, you're flown through it, the puzzles turn off, you go back to the start, the door closes, and the game shuts down as abruptly as it turned on. You're back on your desktop. It's a cycle that has closed itself. Then you start again, but now you're armed with the knowledge of your first playthrough. You see something in the starting area that you missed your first time, an environmental pattern. You go through it and walk by some twisted scenery. You get to the end of your video game dream and wake up. A video plays of a guy in the office that made the game. He walks around, and that's the end. This is pretty blatant, unless the game is lying to you here, which, after the store page stuff, it might be. What does it all mean? Well...
Yes, it is lying, much like the store page was lying, which I conclusively proved when I misunderstood what it was trying to say, and instead went on a rant about something totally different, which is that I didn't like how slow the walk speed was in the game.
You have to think about it and come to your own conclusions, and if anyone wants to criticize it or gets it wrong, then you have that wonderful phrase, "you just didn't get it," which makes zero sense since there's nothing concrete here to actually get aside from the meta dev team stuff.
Oh my god. I mean, it's fine, right? If you don't like postmodernist things, fine, right? But you have to engage with it as what it is, which is a postmodernist work, right? Which is to say that it doesn't try to tell you what the answer is and accepts that there may in fact be multiple answers or no answer, right?
The game is about perspectives. It's taken one of the defining features of postmodernism literally. It's about perspectives, and I don't mean multiple characters or viewpoints on some worthwhile story. I mean this game has a bunch of audio logs strewn around its world that are actual literal perspectives. Quotes from famous people that view the world in a different way, which I assume are accurate because I didn't Google every single one of them. You have the outlook of someone who has studied science, then from a religious man, then someone in between. Stories.
So again, I apologize for the subtitles being layered over subtitles that then therefore make it impossible for you to read them, but hopefully you can at least hear it, right? So I see it as valid to say that the game is about perspective, although this is what I said in my "what is Witness like" thing. It is about kind of two things broadly, if you were to categorize it, right? Which is perspective and the search for truth, right? And the line that you draw is used as a metaphor for truth and the truth that you're searching for in the game, right? And so it's a bunch of things that spiral off of that, right?
That make you look at things in a different way, that make you think about situations like the one about the merchant who convinced himself his boat was seaworthy, and should still be considered guilty even though his intentions weren't malicious when it sunk due to his negligence. They're interesting, I enjoyed listening to them, but they aren't new things written for the game. They're placed to suit this theme of perspectives that is built on as you play, that is matched by how you come to view the island and all of those hidden images and the puzzles there. The concept is capped off in two ways, the first of which is the video room. These 6 videos contradict each other. James Burke states that art isn't as worthwhile as science, that art is easier to understand because it's got people in it, but that it tells you more about the person who made it more than any actual truth. Then you have Richard Feynman, who speaks about how the world can either be viewed as broken down pieces of things or the whole structures that they form. It's a fascinating, different way of looking at things that we have been for our whole lives. This is a clip from a film called Nostalgia, which I'm going to take out of context because I haven't seen it. The man is trying to carry a candle across an area without it blowing out. This seemingly pointless, arbitrary task matches much of what the player is doing in the game. Each time the candle goes out, he seems tempted to either light it again on the spot and cheat, or to give up, but continues anyway. This probably means something else in the movie, but that's the connection I can make in the context of the game. You have two videos which are the worst of the bunch, the one from Rupert Spira, a man so insane that he doesn't know how to tell time anymore. He's clearly pushing some sort of cult-like ideology, and the whole video is awful and slow. I'm assuming this was included to show a warped perception of the world that someone can convince themselves is valid. Like...
Oh my god. Well, we covered that earlier. But I mean, I think the nostalgia clip, he's not totally wrong about it, but it's kind of like, it's a perspective that like meaning is something that we create via the goals that we set for ourselves, right? And we find meaning in them, right? Which is true, right? Certainly if you've ever worked on art of any substantial amount of effort, then you will find meaning in it that is like more than you expected. Even if maybe you start out thinking that it's not that meaningful, right? It will become more meaningful, right? Anyway. I mean, I did not like the audio logs at first, right? I would have rather had a story that was more traditional and written with characters and whatever, right? But I tried to understand the game as deeply as I could, and over time I started to appreciate that that was probably the right choice for the game, because it's the least likely to say things that aren't true, right? And the game is very much kind of trying to deal with very big questions, and there's like, it would be pretentious to think that you as like the creator of this video game have like better perspective on these things than like, you know, stuff that stood the test of time or whatever, right? So it's much easier to see like, here's something that like resonates with me as like a very valid and honest way of approaching the world, and put that in the game, rather than like, I'm just going to try to write something that is doing that. And maybe it gets lost in like that I'm writing some drama, or I was trying to be funny or whatever, right? It's just because the subject matter of the game, if you want to try to do a good job with that and layer in story, it's hard to do a good job with that. But anyway.
The video with the woman that Google tells me is called Gangaji. I apologize for pronouncing that wrong. She speaks about finding inner peace by giving up whatever it is you're searching for in life and accepting your own situation. This is a disgustingly privileged outlook that doesn't last more than 10 seconds of thought. Why is she even giving a talk if she believes it herself? Both of these people present their facts as so deeply simple, fundamental, with calm voices attempting to lull you into submission. Clearly I have some perspective bias of my own here, right? Last up is the long video by...
Oh my god. Yeah. Right. Well, so the Gangaji thing is about like, oftentimes we find like there's sort of a paradoxical thing, right, where we sort of find meaning in what we're aiming at, but also we constantly find ourselves like dissatisfied with the current state of things, right? But the reality is like, there's no difference between you and how you feel is it's just in your consciousness, right? So fundamentally there's like no external requirement for anything, really, as far as like your peace of mind, which is just a first principles analysis of what does that even mean, right? Like the only thing that exists for you is your conscious experience, right? The concept of the world outside of yourself is sort of an illusion that exists inside of your consciousness, right? Because it's like the only way that things can be something that you're aware of is that it's in your consciousness, right? Anyway, so that's kind of what she's talking about there, is like the contradictory nature of that we like think we need to get things and then we'll be happy. Then I'll be able to be happy if I get this thing, right? It's not to say that like that nobody lacks for things. Certainly people lack for things, but this doesn't have anything to do with like your peace of mind. It has to do with like, you know, what do you need to survive or something, right? I don't know, man. It's just like, if you don't know anything, yeah, this Western Eastern philosophy, if you don't know anything about Eastern philosophy at all, you don't understand this, you haven't thought about, you know, how a monk can light themselves on fire and just sit there while they burn to death, right? If you haven't thought about that, then like none of this is going to make any sense to you at all, right? Instead, you're just going to say something stupid here about like privilege or whatever, and that like, she just doesn't understand that some people need things. It's like, what the fuck? All right. Brian Moriarty, he seems to like this video, even though he had to watch it probably twice.
Brian Moriarty, which was the most interesting of them. This speech offers even more contradictions to the witness by saying that overthinking can sometimes be dangerous and that patterns often don't exist at all and are just some people seeing things that aren't there. Which is an odd thing to say in a game that apparently needs you to analyze it to understand it, but also doesn't want you to. The video speaks a lot about the number 46 and its significance in a number of ways, which is deviously linked to the game since it's the 4th video out of 6 in the list that you enter in the video room. The point I'm building to here is that the game is saying a whole load of nothing with all these videos and audio logs. They're perspectives for the sake of perspectives. They can get you thinking, but the assumption the game has and that it needs to educate you is something so terrible that I don't think I need to speak on it further.
Oh my god. Now we're pretentious if we even think that we have anything of value to communicate to another person. If I don't do anything, if I do anything that's like, I mean, this is like the whole thing with the video, like I said, where it's just like, let me talk out of both sides of my mouth and say like, I'm not analyzing the thing, so therefore I'm not obligated to actually even understand it or say anything of value. It's like, no, dude, you're just polluting the internet with your farts. That's what you're doing. Because you don't take any responsibility for things that you put out into the world. And so therefore, because you do that, you think that like it's innately offensive to your ego that somebody else is very careful about what they put out into the world. And therefore they've like thought a lot about that, and like, here are some things that I think you should think about, right? If you're interested in this kind of subject matter, right? That's like part of what the game is doing. And it's a very creative and unique approach, right? But like, and you can not like the game, that's fine if you don't like the game, right? But to like say there's something wrong with making a game that actually wants to communicate something that might be useful to you in your life is just unbelievably asinine. There's nothing wrong with entertainment. I don't think there's something wrong with entertainment. I actually think there's a kind of twin problem here where there's a lot of like artsy fartsy types that don't have the skills to even like entertain, and then they like look down their nose on entertainment because they've inherited this attitude that they've seen in like artists that they looked up to, right? But nevertheless, like those artists, you know, this is like the thing of, you know, David Lynch could make a Quentin Tarantino movie, but Quentin Tarantino could never make a David Lynch movie, right? It's like there's there's nothing wrong with entertainment, and you should be able to do that if you're going to be serious about art, because it's part of like the craft of what you're doing, is having control over the actual medium, right? Caring about art is not like a carte blanche to not give a shit about like the experience of people who are looking at the thing, right? Then you are being pretentious, right? If you're just saying like, well, it's not about you, it's just about me, like fuck the audience, right? Like that's pretentious as far as I'm concerned. But like, and looking down your nose completely at entertainment, right? Because entertainment is valuable. People need to be entertained, right? Sometimes you just need to be entertained. That's fine. And it's not necessarily always easy to do, right? So, but in any case, it's possible to have a higher aspiration than just entertaining people. And I don't like either of these viewpoints, right? I don't like looking down at entertainers that are very skilled and good at what they do. And I also don't like, I don't know, whatever this is, Philistinism or whatever, where you're like, how dare the game have the audacity to presuppose that there might be things in the universe that I don't already understand. Or that I should think about something for myself.
The one saving grace here is that it's linked to the
Sorry for the mocking voice, but like, oh geez, all right.
perception shift you have while playing the game. When you find your first environmental pattern and are suddenly seeing the island in a whole new way. Are there more of these? Where can I find them? You keep seeing circles and lines as you play, which you're also nudged into looking for by completing so many of the panel puzzles. As I wrote this script, I began to buy more into the idea that these environmental puzzles might be the real game in The Witness. The true ending to the game reinforces this idea. After you go through the secret door and listen to the audio credits, you go through the weird hotel/airport lounge and depart back to reality. Your character wakes up and starts touching circles around the office. He's seeing patterns. Because I started seeing patterns after playing this game too. Circles and lines in my apartment, outside in the street, and shadows cast on the wall from light coming through the blinds from outside. Lines of light on the ceiling while I was trying to sleep. It lasted for a few days actually, and from reading online, I wasn't the only one. I consider this to be the whole point of the game, this infection of perception. Look, the game has affected some change in you. Video games can do that, except it's more like an exaggerated version of the Tetris effect when you start seeing the shapes and patterns of a game after playing it for so much because of an intense session of a repetitive task. Like I said earlier, maybe there's more to this game hidden away, some secret to do.
I'm forever haunted by the cookie that goes behind the stove. Some say that cookie is still there till this day. We need the little, it really needed to have, I think, for me to be satisfied with the story of The Witness, it should have had a little subtitle that popped up right at that time that says, "The staff ate the cookie later."
With the obelisks, of which there are 6, and completing the game in a cycle in a certain sequence. Maybe there's some real answer to why it's called The Witness, which I could only guess at being connected to some of the audio logs. The one on the mountain did it for me, since it brought human achievement together and made those who accomplished it know better than the rest, simply the person who is part of the greater whole that got to be our representative, the one who got to witness it. Aside from gameplay, this is all the game had to offer me, and it was done with so much unnecessary obfuscation that the payoff wasn't worth it. Maybe there's more to it than I missed, maybe I'm expecting too much, or hey, maybe I just didn't get it.
And a dream.
And a dream.
And a dream.
And a dream.
Is it over?
Thank you for watching. If this was the first...
Okay. I think it's over. Okay. Well, that was that. I try, like I said, I try to not be too harsh on the like mispronouncing words, although, because it's just a little bit of a low blow. It's a little bit of a low blow. You know, maybe you shouldn't put words in your video that you can't pronounce. It makes it sound like ChatGPT wrote it, but we know that ChatGPT was not actually available at this time, or else the video might have been better. But anyway, that was The Witness, a great game that you shouldn't play by Joseph Anderson, the most popular video on the internet about The Witness. I think we can all agree that it was more or less a waste of all of our time. But hopefully my reaction to this was worth your $500. I had a slight thought of doing performance art out of this whole thing. And just watching the entire thing, and then saying I agree completely at the end. But it turned out that it wouldn't have been possible for me to do that because it was so aggravating to watch. But yeah, maybe that's what I'll call the archive of it. I don't know. Great video that you shouldn't watch. Terrible video that you shouldn't watch. More like it. Just fucking information pollution on the internet. Yeah, I mean, I could have moved the captions up, right? The captions on YouTube are just where they are. But it is a little annoying, that part of it. Okay, so this is going to require some amount of editing. But I'm pretty much going to cut off the recording here, and then like later I can try to clean all this up. So if you're watching the recording, thanks for watching. Reminder that this was funded by some people with disposable income over on Ko-fi. So there'll be a link in the description. If you liked this, you can throw some money in the tip jar. I think it was probably, you know, I feel like it was about $500 worth of work there. I took 500 points of psychic damage, I can say that. So, anyway. Oh, also, I'll just take a minute to plug that I am working on this extremely long lecture. We talked about that again at the beginning. But that's worth plugging. Also, if you have somehow you've stumbled upon this video and you have no idea who I am, I'm a game designer. My name is Matthew Van Diemender. I made a game called Taiji. It's a game that's sort of like The Witness. By the time you see this video, it's no longer going to be on deep discount, but it is on deep discount right now. So anyway, I will see you all hopefully soon when this lecture is done. Bye-bye.